Okay, I'll ask our webcast person to start the webcast, and I will be briefly looking at the webcast page, and I will let you know when I see the webcast visible on the public website. So just bear with me as I watch for that. Okay, I do see that the Citizen Redistricting Committee link is now on our public website. If you would like to begin the meeting, and let me begin recording the meeting as well.
Thank you, Joanne. I appreciate it. Well, welcome everyone to the organizational meeting of the Citizen Redistricting Committee. The committee was created by Senate Bill 304, Section 2, called the Redistricting Act. It passed the legislature with only 2 dissenting votes and was signed by Governor Lujan Grisham. The Senate President Mimi Stewart, Senate Minority Leader Greg Baca, House Speaker Brian Egoff, House Minority Leader James Townsend, and the State Ethics Commission were the appointing authorities of the members of this committee. I look forward to working with each of the members of the committee. I wanted to alert you that the first item on the agenda will be a roll call, so I will call the names of each committee member. And if you would just signify by saying present, I would appreciate it. Ryan Cangelosi.
Present.
Did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did. Very good.
Lisa Curtis.
Present.
Robert Radigan.
Present.
Joaquin Sanchez.
Presente.
Michael Sanchez.
I'm here.
Christopher Salcedo.
Here.
Okay, what I'd like to do is just begin with a few introductions so we can introduce ourselves to the public. My name is Ed Chavez. I was appointed by the State Ethics Commission. I retired from the New Mexico Supreme Court 3 years ago. And since that time, I've just been engaged in a number of activities that I believe count for my participation in our democracy. And I look forward to hearing comments from the public and from my colleagues today. Ryan, you want to go next?
Yes, sir. I'm Ryan Cangelosi. I work for the University of New Mexico Health Sciences Center. I was appointed by the Minority Leader of the House, Representative Jim Townsend. It's very nice to be here today.
Lisa?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Curtis. I'm a lawyer. I've spent almost 30 years doing that job, mother of 4, married to Bob. I have spent my career representing the people in this state when they've been wronged by others. I am the chair of the New Mexico Commission on the Status of Women, and I am really looking forward to hearing what the public have to say about how we are going to redistrict this state. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Robert?
Hi, good afternoon. Robert Radigan from Albuquerque, husband of beautifully and endlessly supportive wife, Allison, father of a sweet and adorable 6-year-old Leela, and a modern day explorer of the great state of New Mexico. My professional background is in geography and demography. My day job is Director of Geospatial and Population Studies at UNM. I serve as the state demographer and the state's liaison to the United States Census Bureau. And in that capacity, I had the opportunity throughout 2019 and 2020 to work with people and communities throughout New Mexico to ensure a complete and accurate census count of our state. And I see redistricting as sort of a culmination of the decennial census cycle. I'm honored to be a part of it. I thank the Ethics Commission for the appointment and the people in New Mexico for the opportunity to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Joaquin.
Thank you, Justice. Joaquin Sanchez. Let's see, married to Alicia Hernandez Sanchez. August 1, it'll be 29 years. father to Josue Maclovio, who just graduated from Valley High School and will be attending UNM in the fall. My other son is Isaac Patricio Sanchez, who is an entering 11th grader at Robert F. Kennedy Charter High School in the South Valley. And in many ways, it's his fault that I submitted an application, because he wanted to know what he and I could do to be part of strengthening democracy. So he's the one that asked the question, and then we kind of figured it out together. And I didn't know where it was going to go, but ended up getting selected by the State Ethics Commission. I am a math teacher at South Valley Academy. And before that, I worked as a community organizer with the Industrial Areas Foundation in Texas, California, here in New Mexico. And before that, I worked for a while as a civil engineer. And I am looking forward to this process and want to figure out how we make this as accessible and interesting to the public and to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Joaquin. Michael.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here. I was appointed by the Speaker of the House, and my name is Michael S. Sanchez. I am an attorney and have been practicing for 40 some years, Chief Justice. I'm still learning how to practice. I'm from Valencia County. I was born and raised in Belen, which is still a rural area. If anybody has any doubts, I would invite them down to come and watch our farmers with their alfalfa and their green chili. It's a wonderful place to live with wonderful people. I really look forward to working with the members of the commission. And oh, by the way, I did spend a little time in the New Mexico legislature a while back. And I've been through one redistricting, which will be a lot different than what we are going to experience on this commission. So again, I look forward to working with everyone. I think I'm an eternal optimist, and I know we can get it done. So glad to be here.
Thank you, Michael. Christopher.
Thank you, Justice. Christopher Salcedo. I'm the father of two, husband of one. She's an educator here in Albuquerque. I've been in Albuquerque now, I guess it's 20, going on 22 years, I believe it is. Before that, I spent the first 25 years of my life in Doñana County. So, you know, I think I know the state and love different parts of it. And so I'm very excited about this process. Been practicing law in Albuquerque now over 2 decades, have my own firm, and again, just excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Just so the public knows, I told you about my retirement, but I'm a native New Mexican. I have 3 children and 8 grandchildren. They all keep me very active. We've all been committed to, in one way or another, helping out the low-income families in New Mexico. My oldest son as a doctor down in the South Valley, my youngest son as a dentist down in the South Valley, and now a pediatric dentist. My daughter, who is an attorney who focuses on immigrant issues and is homeschooling 4 of my grandchildren. I think that having grown up in small ranching communities in New Mexico, Torrance and San Miguel counties, that I remain true to my roots. I look forward to working all of the committee members and look forward to the many public meetings that we will have so that we could try to do our best job for the people of New Mexico. Section 5B of the Redistricting Act provides that before we enter upon the duties of our office, that each member shall review the Redistricting Act and then take the oath of office as provided by state law. I've asked Chief Justice Michael E.V. Heel if he would please administer the oath to the committee members, and he has agreed to do so. So, Chief Justice, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Justice Chavez. I was going to give that introduction about Section 5B of Senate Bill 304, but everyone knows that you have to take an oath of office before starting your job. and also review this, according to the statute, review the statute itself of the State Redistricting Act. So this is a critical and important part of beginning, and it is my honor and my privilege to swear you in as the initial members of this committee. And, you know, it's the linchpin of democracy, protecting the right to vote. And this committee is the first step, I believe, in, and one of the primary steps, I believe, in ensuring that the right to vote will remain one person, one vote in the upcoming elections. So with that, I would ask, you can either sit or stand, it's your option, but I would ask you to, and I'm going to swear the members of the committee first, and then Justice Chavez as the chair last. And so as not to cut into your time of your initial meeting, I prefer to swear you in all at one time as a group. So if each of you would please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Michael
I,
Sager,
Robert
Chris
Radigan,
Salcedo,
Do solemnly swear
Do
do
solemnly
solemnly
swear
swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
That I will support the
the
Constitution
Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of New Mexico,
and the
Constitution and
Constitution
laws
and
of the
laws
state of
of
New
the state of New
Mexico,
Mexico,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and
and
that
that
I will
faithfully
faithfully and impartially
partially
discharge the duties
discharge the
discharge
duties
the duties
of Citizen Redistricting Committee
of
of
citizens
Citizen
Citizen
Redistricting
Redistricting
Committee
on which I'm about to enter
on which
on
I
which
I'm about to enter
to the best of my ability,
to the best
best of my ability.
so help me God.
So
So
help
help
me.
so help me God.
Congratulations to all of you. Justice Chavez, if you would please follow suit, raise your right hand, please.
Yes, sir.
I, Edward L. Chavez,
I, Edward L. Chavez,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of New Mexico,
and the Constitution and laws of the state of New Mexico,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
of Chair, Citizens Redistricting Committee,
of Chair, Citizens Redistricting Committee,
on which I'm about to enter
on which I'm about to enter,
to the best of my ability,
the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I understand that many of you may have submitted sworn affidavits to the Secretary of State concerning the oath. Those of you who have not will have to make arrangements to have this oath signed and filed with the Secretary of State through my office. We can make those arrangements later. We can't do that today, obviously, but we'll make those arrangements. Again, I reviewed your act. You have a lot of work to do. And so with that, I'll turn it back to Justice Chavez. Thank you again for the honor and the privilege.
Thank you, Chief Justice. I have submitted an agenda, members of the committee, and it's been published for the public to see. It was published in advance of 72 hours before this meeting. And I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as written.
So moved.
Do I have a
Second,
second? Been
second,
moved and seconded that we adopt the agenda as written and move forward. All in favor signify by saying aye.
aye.
I,
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Okay, thank you very much. For the members of the public, just to explain that once every 10 years from federal census data, New Mexico learns about how population and demographic changes may have affected how congressional boundaries and state house and state senate boundaries are drawn. The Citizens Redistricting Committee will submit proposed plans to the legislature for the New Mexico state legislative and congressional boundaries. This is required by federal law after every decade's census. In order to fulfill our responsibilities, the committee must hold no fewer than 12 public meetings in compliance with the Open Meetings Act to gather public input as to how these boundaries should be drawn. There are many legal, geographic, and demographic factors the committee will have to take into consideration when proposing maps, and public input will be critical as we attempt to carefully balance these factors. Under Section B of the Redistricting Act, the committee was instructed that beginning no later than July 1, 2021, the committee may develop and adopt procedures for public hearings, hire staff, and enter into contracts and interagency agreements, including agreements to provide for professional, technical, and legal services that are going to be necessary to accomplish our duties under the Act. The purpose of today's meeting is to organize the committee so that we can begin to educate the public about the importance of redistricting, the importance of the public's participation, how it can participate, and how we as a committee intend to be transparent as we draw maps that we will propose for adoption to the legislature. What the committee knows and the public will learn today is that I alerted the committee members to many issues that we have to consider as we organize. What you will see in the materials are what I have proposed to begin the discussion of organizing ourselves. Obviously, the committee members will have input into what we do, but for many action items, public comment will be permitted. I ask you to participate and to share your comments with respect to some of the things that are being proposed. If possible, I ask you to be concise and understand that we have a lot to try to get through in 2 hours. If you could keep your remarks to just a few minutes, that would be great. And if you simply want to state that you agree with somebody else's comments, that would also be fine. We do want to hear from you. So raise your hand in the participant box, and Joanne Van der Streek, whom I appreciate very much for helping us coordinate the Zoom meeting, she can promote you so that we may hear your comments. The first item on the agenda is actually something that is for the benefit of the public. This is the online portal for submission of public maps and testimony. Jeremy Ferris and people at the State Ethics Commission and I have worked a little bit with this group that are preparing a website that will allow you to submit written comments, will allow you to draw maps that you want to propose, portions of maps, things of that nature. And I thought it would be important to have Moon Dutchin and Luis Delgadillo from Tufts University, who is developing this website, to give us a demonstration of the website so that you can see what is to be expected. I don't believe that it's been finalized yet, but it is close. And so what I'd like to do is, once we see the demonstration, if the public have some feedback for Tufts University on how they might be able to improve the system, that would be great. I am actually interested in seeing if we can translate their work into Spanish and Navajo. I don't know about other languages, but that's something that I think we as a committee ought to explore. With that, I apologize, Ms. Dutchin and Luis Delgadillo, that I don't have more of an introduction for you. But if you don't mind, if you would please share the screen and give us a demonstration of the website that you are working on.
Absolutely. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Moon Dutchin. I'm a professor of mathematics at Tufts University, and I run a lab called the MGGG Redistricting Lab. So our focus is on all things redistricting, voting rights, census, and we have a staff of mathematicians, computer scientists, geographers, outreach specialists who work very hard to support all kinds of democracy promoting efforts around the country. So I'm gonna share a screen and show you some things about our group and then about the portal that we've been building in hopes that you'll adopt it in New Mexico. So I'll start by saying this is mggg.org. This is the website for our group, and I invite you to check it out and see some of what we're about. What you'll see is that we're very research active, and so Our mission combines research, tools and resources for public access, partnering with civil rights organizations, and offering formal and informal expert consulting to stakeholders on all sides. It's important for me to emphasize that we are thoroughly and committedly nonpartisan. We really are a lab that comes out of a research effort and that has grown into a staff that supports public mapping efforts around the country. So if you visit our website, you can see some of what we've been up to recently. On the research side, we're one of the foremost groups in the country understanding the census's new privacy measures. So we have a differential privacy paper out recently, research on the Voting Rights Act, looking at ranked choice voting and its impacts on minority representation, and a lot more. I'm happy to take questions about some of the broader work of the lab. But today I want to talk to you about specifically a tool that we've built called Redistricting for letting the public draw their own maps and sort of take it upon themselves to show you in mapped form what they're looking for when it comes to representation. So I will start by showing you a portal that was launched about 2 months ago in early May. And this is a portal in the state of Michigan. So the Michigan also has an independent redistricting committee for the first time in this cycle. And that committee contracted with us to build this public input portal. So if you visit it and look through it, you'll see some information on the kinds of testimony, written testimony or a written public comment. You can draw your own districting plan. You can submit a community of interest. And let me take a moment to emphasize that these are two different and fundamental kinds of input that you may receive from the public. On one hand, people trying their own hands at balancing all of the complicated traditional and new districting criteria that are kind of necessary to fuse in order to produce a good plan that will promote maximum representative democracy. And on the other hand, communities of interest, which can be as small as neighborhoods or as large as regions. And it's parts of the state where people have a story to tell about shared representational needs. So they'll tell you what unites the community in terms of their needs, whether it's needs for infrastructure, whether it has to do with schools, whether it has to do with natural resources. And then they'll show you on a map where the locus of that shared interest so that you can take it into account when you draw your lines. There's the option to submit many different forms of testimony. Say a little bit about yourself and submit. And in a moment after I show you some of what the public input has looked like, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Luis Delgadillo, who will show you what it looks like to draw a map with this tool. I'll mention that the website has videos that show how-tos. So they're sort of introductory short tutorials showing you how to use the mapping tools, but also our group offers free and public training sessions on a weekly basis so that members of the public who might need a little bit more than a 5-minute video can come and learn how to use these tools. So what I'd like to show you first is what the kind of public input that is received through a tool like this might look like. So this is the gallery part of the page. And again, I'm starting with Michigan. And what you can see is a combination of different forms of input. Some people have written comment, and that's denoted with this megaphone symbol. Some people have sent in their communities of interest, and here they've drawn them and said what it is that they'd like you to know about those areas. And some people have drawn districting plans, whether single districts or a complete plan. And to give you a sense of how successful this tool has been, there's an advanced search view where you can search for the last few days. And so let me just show you from June 30th to today, the Michigan tool has received 131 pieces of public input, which is really just a stunning response from the public, who's finding it apparently a congenial tool to express what they want to say. And if you click the cards for each of these, you can see details. So you get to see what the written testimony looks like. And then there's an opportunity for members of the public to comment on each other's input and have a robust conversation. I'll show you a few more of these until we see one that comes with a map. Okay, so here a submitter has drawn a map in this case, greater Detroit area. And you can zoom in, you can mouse over to see what some of the points of interest are. And there's information here about what they would like their commission to know about drawing the map. So this is a glimpse of what public input looks like. And we've set up a New Mexico version of the same portal. And so the New Mexico version is as yet unused. Nothing has been submitted so far, but we'd like to show you today a little bit about what that would look like and what that would do for you so that you can consider whether you'd like to adopt this as your public input tool. Any questions so far? I'll continue to show you some of the features, but let me do that slowly. Okay, hearing no questions. Under the mapping section, you have the option to draw congressional districts, state Senate districts, state House districts, or communities. And let's take a look briefly at what that would look like. If you click one of these buttons, it drops you into a blank plan of the state. And in a moment, as I said, Luis will take you through an example of actually drawing, but you can draw the districts and take it from there. Okay. Additionally, I see a question. Joaquin Sanchez?
Yeah, don't we need to include the Public Education Commission districts as well?
Those can easily be added. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And so actually that's an important thing to emphasize. We're building this tool in cooperation with you. And so the tool is being customized to the needs in New Mexico. And so one thing I'll emphasize, for instance, is that because in New Mexico, you have a criterion that says that partisan data shouldn't be taken into account. That means when you look at the mapping module from the portal, if you look through this, you'll see that there's no partisan data that's been included in the data layers. So the tool is being customized for your criteria and your needs in New Mexico. You'll notice, for instance, we have a data layer showing pueblos, tribes, and nations. These come from the census designated boundaries because we know how important that is to thinking about communities in New Mexico. And exactly along those lines, we're looking forward to working with you to adapt the tool to your local needs.
And this can be fully translated into Spanish or Navajo or other languages?
Yeah, we already have an effort underway led by Luis to translate the portal into Spanish. And we will need your assistance in translating into Navajo, but we're happy to work with your translators so that the portal can be fully available in at least those 3 languages. Any other questions at this point? Okay, I'll add a couple other features and I'll show you a little bit around the Michigan gallery that we have so far and then hand it off. So if I go back out to the advanced search page, let me give you a sense. So as I said, this has been functional for 2 months so far, and there've been nearly 1,000 submissions in 2 months. And as you saw, there were already just over 100 in only the last few days. You're able to search these by type. And so you can see that, for instance, in Michigan, the leading type is written testimony. More than half, just over half of the submissions are written testimony. But on districting plans, there are already 244 districting plans that people have submitted. And those are things that you might find to be valuable as you start your line drawing process. So look at plans submitted by members of the public and understand what kind of lines they have and the story that goes with those lines about the representational needs that are fulfilled by their plans. Communities of interest, 82 so far. And these I think you'll find extremely interesting. If you click through to see what they look like, you'll notice frequently the submitter will also tag their plans with the names of groups or places or organizations. Already in the New Mexico tool that we've mocked up, one thing you'll notice is that in the submission form, we have a field for your organization if applicable, because we know that some citizens will want to work through their grassroots organizations to come up with some sort of consensus community mapping and speak to you with the voice of an organization rather than an individual. In our experience with public mapping, both forms of input are extremely valuable, both the kind that come from individuals and the kind that come from groups. And so we've added a field here to let you distinguish which kind of submission you're receiving. I would like to find an example. Let me go back to the gallery and find you an example of a plan that has a comment. So here's the initial plan, and the tool pans and zooms to the area that's been painted in the plan. And then you see, so Gail O'Neill is the original submitter, and Bob Dindoffer has added a comment. And so what we're finding is that the ability to add comments to other people's submissions, and incidentally, when you add a comment, you can also add tags. It makes it a lot easier to sort of have a really open-ended public conversation where people all kind of raise their voices together and let you know kind of what you need to know about the different neighborhoods, regions, and areas of the state and what their needs may be in terms of government. Okay, I think that's a good introduction to the gallery. I'll show you one other thing before I hand over the mic, and that is at the end of the process, if the process is as successful as I expect that it will be, you'll have a great deal of input. And what you'll need to know is, how do we synthesize all of this input? So I want to show you an example of the kind of synthesis data product that we can provide you at the end of the process, so that you can take the input, you know, in kind of as robust of a way as possible into account as you draw your lines. So here's a sample presentation, again, based on the Michigan data. Okay, so this is an example of 1 week's worth of community input from Michigan. And here what you're doing is you're seeing it as an overlay. If you compare the submissions to the population centers, to the urban centers in the state, you can see that so far, a lot of the input is coming from cities and the sort of greater metropolitan areas around the cities, although some of it is also coming from the lakeshore regions up to the north of Michigan. And here is a heat map that synthesizes that input to tell you what areas of the state so far are receiving a lot of input and what areas are so far untouched. And this is information that our lab is prepared to provide on a weekly basis to give you trends and summaries of the input that you're receiving so far, so that you can target your outreach to parts of the state where you might need to hear more from folks who live there. This, I hope, will help you sort of work with your partner organizations around the state to best hear all the different diversity of voices that you'd like to take into account in your process. Okay. So I'll stop there, and I'll again ask if you have any questions, and otherwise I will hand it over to Luis.
Justice, I had a question.
Yes.
So if I'm a member of the public and I go on and I look at maps that other people have done, is there a way for me to show that I'm in agreement with that map?
Absolutely. That's how we conceive of the comment feature. So I encourage you to check out the Michigan portal to see how that's shaping up there over the first 2 months that it's existed. But that's the most common kind of comment is a supportive comment, an amplifying comment. And I think that you'll hopefully find that very valuable.
Great. If there are no more questions, I can start. Hi, my name is Luis Delgadillo. I'm an outreach coordinator for the lab, and I'm going to be showing you what it would look like for one of your community members to draw a map with our software. So I'm from El Paso, Texas, very close to Las Cruces, New Mexico. So I'm in love with the region. And I'm going to show you what it will look like. So we have a lot of different features and tools here in Districtor. We have a paintbrush to kind of color in the blocks, precincts, or block groups, whatever measurement you're drawing in. You can change the size of that paintbrush. You can erase some of the things you've done. And then I'll show you how to save and how to hopefully submit to your state submission portal. So first step, I would go ahead and color in what I believe are the fundamental parts of my community. And let's say for intended practices, my community ends right along here. it's better for me to include that whole block instead of leaving it out. And I can tell the map drawers that, you know, my community ends at this street, or I could even add an important place and designate that as the end of my community. But it's better to have more of it than leave something out. A very important feature is naming also your community. I'm just gonna name it Homestead, sorry. But, and then you wanna describe your community. You wanna tell map drawers why it's so important. What are some of the issues that unite your community, the people that live here, you know, what's important, what do you want your representatives to get done, why should your community be kept in one piece? And so you may write some things like in my community, many first and second generation immigrants, we don't have a sewage system because we're outside of the city. So it's something that residents have been pushing for. We don't have a lot of sidewalks. That's something else we've been pushing for. So that's some of the things you may include in that description. And you can make it as short as a sentence, as long as a paragraph, depending on what you feel is important. There are a lot of other features that I would like to also highlight, but of course, I don't want to take a lot of your time. Let's say once you're drawing your map, also, actually, let me touch on one more thing. You can add more than one community. So if you decide that there's another community worth noting for the map drawers, you can do that as well. You can add as many communities as you need. And these communities can even overlap. And then you can, in your description, say why they overlap, why it's important for them to be together. Maybe what they have in common or what they have in difference. Then you can go ahead and save your map. It'll create this URL, which you can copy, this thing right here. You can use this URL to make your submission to your state's portal. Now I'm gonna go ahead and show you what it would look like from, yeah. Well, if there are any more questions, we run trainings Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, which your commission can make you aware of. Thank you so much for your time, and if there are any questions, we're here.
Joanne, I know there were some questions from the public that are in the chat box. Would you please read the questions one at a time?
Okay, this is Joanne. Reading backwards from the chat, there is a question. Is there a feature to verify a user is from New Mexico, or that the user only has one account?
Great. So we gave a great deal of thought to how we want to identify and authenticate submitters. So we ask for a self-identification, but we ask for an email address. And in order to submit comment, the email is validated. So we send a magic link to that email address, and you have to click the link in order for your submission to appear. And so that means we can authenticate that the person does have the email address that they claim to have in that way. But that's about it. And we propose that you think about this as analogous to what would happen at a public hearing. When someone comes to the mic, they self-identify, they tell you who they are and where they live. And it's never been the practice at public hearings, as far as I'm aware, to try to verify or validate that the person does indeed have the address that they say. And of course, this is only harder, authenticating identity is only harder online. But I will say that the tool does collect IP addresses, and we have fairly high security measures in place guarding against various kinds of bots and attacks that you might anticipate. We have a very good data security, so you can be sure that you won't lose data due to an attack. Yes, I will be happy to put the Michigan website into the chat. Here it is. I encourage you to check that out. I see that a question is where do we get our funding from? Do we get it from both political parties? In fact, we don't get any funding from political parties. The #1 source of funding of our lab is the National Science Foundation. So I emphasize we're a really nonpartisan, university-based research lab who's engaged in a public mapping outreach effort.
Previous question, is there a way to identify neighborhoods that have not responded within an area that has a high response rate?
Absolutely. So that's part of the weekly summary that we'll be providing. We not only give you an overview that zooms out on the whole state, but we can also show you zoom ins to insets. And so we'll ask the commission, if we get to work with you, what areas you'd like to see insets of, and we can show you details of parts of the state that you're concerned to be sure to hear from.
Another question, how are we ensured this is nonpartisan?
Well, I think the input itself is from the broad public. And so you might well see that some comments from the public will be partisan. And I expect you will, if you take a look at the Michigan site, you'll certainly see that as an example. There are comments that come from partisans on both sides and from members of third parties. But our work as a research lab is scrupulously nonpartisan. And as I said, funded by the National Science Foundation as our #1 funder.
Okay, another question that came in the chat is, has this been used in rural communities such as New Mexico? We are a very sparse state.
Absolutely. For instance, we have a portal set up in Grand County, Utah. Population of the whole county is about 5,000. So this is being used in dense urban places and rural places and everywhere in between. Districtor is also being used by the Alaska Redistricting Board. They certainly have many of the same kinds of scale challenges, in addition to sort of the importance of Native communities that you see in New Mexico.
Okay, how will people with no internet access be able to provide input?
Great, so I think that's a fundamentally important question. So, you know, people who have no internet access sort of in laptop form are able to access the portal on a phone or on a tablet. And our hope, we designed Districtor really with maximum accessibility in mind. So it's all browser-based, and it really does work fairly well on a tablet. And one of our hopes that we have seen accomplished so far in other states is that organizers would also visit communities where we know that there's less internet access and be able to hold public meetings, encourage people to submit at those meetings, and even be able to go in the targeted door-to-door fashion in areas where you think that that would support the work of the commission. And actually, I should sort of amplify that by saying the trainings that Luis mentioned that we offer multiple times a week include an interview component where we teach people how to go out in their communities and interview others in order to be maximally inclusive. So we call our sessions Train the Trainers. So we not only teach people how to draw their own communities, but how to sort of pay it forward and go out and encourage others who may not have primary access to meetings or to the tool to be able to have their voices heard as well.
Justice Chavez, somebody asked in the chat if they can submit their comments in Spanish. Is that something you are okay with?
Absolutely. In fact, if I understood Moon correctly, Luis is actually working on the Spanish translation now. And I think that should be made available to the public to the extent we can accommodate the multicultural, multilingual aspect of our state. I think we should make every effort to do so.
Okay, are you, I mean, to public comment or public questions for this committee meeting? Is that okay?
Would you check to see if anybody has their hands up?
Well, we do have one more in the chat box, and we have 2 attendees we have 2 additional questions in the chat box and 2 people in the attendee room with their hand raised.
Okay, would you go ahead and proceed?
With those with their hands up or with the chat questions?
With the chat questions. Did you have a question about?
I'm sure you sent it to panelists and attendees.
Okay, the chat questions, continuing from that, is there software to flag potential gerrymandering efforts?
Right, so I would say our lab is at the forefront of kind of algorithmic assistance in flagging gerrymandering and in just analyzing redistricting. So there are lots of tools that can be used to sort of advise people and help you make a good comparative assessment. But there are never going to be computers that do the hard work of better redistricting for you. It's always going to be about good people like your commission coming together to sort of debate the principles and put them best into effect. But there are labs like ours that are here to provide the data science support to be able to do that in the most robust and comparative way.
Okay, and the last question from the chat box, how are all registered New Mexico voters notified of redistricting so they can participate?
I think that might be more of a question for the commission. So what do the outreach efforts look like to notify the public of the opportunity to participate?
Yeah, later on in discussing the budget, I do have a proposal for the committee to consider to do some community outreach. And I'm asking that we allocate $100,000 for that purpose. And I also want to encourage each committee member to go out, talk on media programs, talk to any groups that would want to hear from them. And it's important to me that the public be educated about redistricting and how they can actively participate in the process. So I think I plan to have a robust community outreach effort, but it's the committee's decision, and we'll get to that later on the agenda.
Okay, we have 3 individuals with their raised in the attendee room. The first name that appears in the list is Elisa. Would you like me to unmute her?
Please.
Okay, Elisa, I'm going to hit the button to allow you to talk. Lisa, you are currently muted.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you so much for your interest in pursuing this very heavy task of redistricting for the state of New Mexico. One of the concerns that I have, and I know we've heard a lot of talk about the interests of transparency, and I just want to address some concerns that raise some red flags in respect to that. So in particular, proposed item number 10, I believe would stifle and suppress the opportunity for public participation and communication with members of the committee. And I just want to express my concern and really standing against the committee's effort to pass item 10 as a rule. And I think number 1, but number 2, I think it's especially alarming about the true nonpartisan nature of this committee process, when I've witnessed the committee itself has already shown public preferential and partisan conduct on its social media platforms, aligning, they're sort of with partisan groups that have spent resources and influence in support of one side, that being the Democrat side. And maybe you can shed a light on why the committee itself on its social media platforms, in particular on Twitter, have shared posts and tweets from partisan organizations that have, I think one is called Native Vote, that has already endorsed, had previously endorsed Joe Biden, as well as Democrat Melanie Stansbury. And so, in order to restore the spirit of nonpartisanship, when the committee has already demonstrated a preferential treatment in that area, how can you assure us today that this is going to be a nonpartisan effort from here on out? And I thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, if you can address those 2 concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We were trying to limit the questions to just the platform that was being shown. We will go through the rules, and the rule 10 that you are referencing is what is referenced as the ex parte rule. As far as the Twitter platform, I apologize. I haven't looked at what has been on the Twitter, so I really can't answer that. I will take a look at that, and if you will get me contact information, I will be glad to be in touch with you. This is a balanced committee. Republicans, Democrats, and decline to state individuals, and they've each pledged to work together in a nonpartisan fashion. And I believe in people, and I believe in their desire to be effective. And my assurance to you is that if we follow our process, we are going to succeed in being nonpartisan. It will be difficult because as somebody proposes a community of interest, it will affect communities of interest in other districts or in other areas of the same district. There are going to be some very difficult decisions for this committee to make, but we can't make those decisions without public input. Are there other hands up, Joanne?
Yes, Justice Chavez. The next hand that is raised is Mario Jimenez. I will hit the allow to talk button.
Please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I am Mario Jimenez with Common Cause New Mexico. First, I'd like to thank the committee for taking on the task of redrawing our political boundaries, which of course is going to be no simple task. We at Common Cause have never seen this much interest in redistricting in the last 40 years. And this is a valuable and unique opportunity for all New Mexicans to participate in redistricting meetings. And that is mainly due to the software like the online portal that has been presented here today. The online portal gives more community participation than they have ever had in the redistricting process. Giving the public the ability to submit maps and comments through the online portal expands public participation beyond the meetings that will be held by this committee. And I would simply urge the committee to adopt the use of the online portal that has been presented here today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments, Joanne?
Yes, the next hand raised is Richard Mason. Richard, I will hit the allow to talk button.
Yes, Justice Chavez, members of the committee, my name is Dick Mason. I'm chair of the Action Committee of the League of Women Voters of New Mexico. And I was part of the New Mexico first redistricting task force. And we discussed this and felt it was important to have a public, input tool. Also, I've had discussions within the League of Women Voters. It's a very public input. It's very, very important to us. I've also participated in some of the discussions around the development of tool and adapting it to the needs of New Mexico. And I've heard from people who have tried it out and got very, very positive responses on this. So I do urge the committee to adopt Districtr as the public input vehicle for the committee. Thank you.
Joanne, is that it for hands raised?
We have 2 additional hands raised. The next name that shows up in the list is Anthony Amistiger. I apologize for the, oh wait, that person's hand went down. I apologize, oh, this person's hand is back up. I apologize for mispronouncing your name or not sure how to pronounce that name. Would you like me to hit the allow to talk button?
Please.
Okay, Anthony, you can unmute.
I am unmuted, I think. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I did have a question about the gerrymandering being included with the tool. The only time I ever hear about gerrymandering is when Democrats accidentally send me an email for one of their campaigns or whatever. To me, it seems like a partisan idea. Why would that be included with the tool?
Oh, sorry, just to clarify, there's no language about gerrymandering or gerrymandering detection or anything like that in the tool. Tool is simply a public input tool so that you can hear what folks have to say from across the state.
Okay, well, I might have misunderstood you then.
Okay, just to be sure, it truly is just a nonpartisan mechanism that you can use to let people say, first of all, exactly what they would have said at a mic, at a hearing, whatever that may be. And secondly, to attach that to a map so that you can visualize the input. That's really what the tool is for.
Just to be clear, did you say that there was a way to check gerrymandering in the map?
No.
To make sure that wasn't happening?
No,
I might have misunderstood that part. Okay.
Nothing like that is built in. The intention of my comments was to say there doesn't exist a tool that automatically detects gerrymandering.
Okay.
There do exist technologies that people use to try to get a sense of how maps compare to other maps that would have been possible, but none of that amounts to automatic detection of gerrymandering.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Is that it, Joanne? For hands raised?
We have two additional names. The next name that appears in the list has username Cosmic Marauder 33. Would you like me to hit the allow to talk button at this time?
Please.
Okay, Cosmic Marauder 33, you can unmute.
Hi there. How are you? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes,
Yes,
we can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you. Just one question I wanted to note, like I was a political science student in college, and just one thing I kind of noticed is a lot of the districts in the past, they seem to be hyper focused around the population centers in New Mexico about, around Albuquerque, maybe Las Cruces, our capital, maybe Los Alamos County. Is there any committee members that are particularly motivated to address this, or are there any like unique ideas or suggestions on how we could maybe incorporate some of these rural surrounding areas with these urban centers and try to get a more, what I would say, more fair representation of voices in certain city policies and county policies, mandates, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Cosmic. Joanne, any others?
We have one additional hand raised, Mike Daly.
No answer.
Actually, if I could, I would just say to Cosmic Marauder's point before we move on, that the hope is that by getting aggregated, spatialized information about where your comments are coming from, that's a tool that can help you make sure that you have outreach. Sort of in that example I showed you for Michigan, that was a great example. We were seeing the urban areas overrepresented in terms of input, and by synthesizing that data and sharing it with the commission, we enable them to do outreach to the more rural parts of the state that are being less represented.
So in Cosmic, this is Lisa Curtis. So if you take a look at what the law states, I mean, we will be out in rural New Mexico specifically, personally, to talk to the people in that group. And what Justice Chavez was saying earlier, that we're devoting a specific amount of money in the budget to outreach. So we absolutely intend to be hearing from all of rural New Mexico. It is the schedule is not at all favoring the urban areas. It is in all 4 quadrants of the state, and we will be out at least 12 times during this very short period of time. So, and then obviously the public portal aspect of what we're talking about right now is meant to address largely the issue that you're talking about in addition. I hope that's helpful.
Could I add one thing, Justice?
Yes, Joaquin.
And this is my understanding, and I think this falls in the category of, as we're doing this process, I think it's also going to need to be not just the decision-making process and input gathering process, but also an educational process, because districts, as I understand, have to have roughly the same population, whether it's rural or urban or semi-urban. So I think that's part of what we need to figure out and how to balance that around the state. And then in terms of specifically the portal, I think technology, we always need to remember that it's a tool, but that it doesn't take the place of, figuring out how to, and you can never do a perfect job, but how to communicate with as many people as possible. So the technology we're talking about is not to take the place of the public hearings, it's to strengthen those public hearings. So I think part of this is not just, we're doing this portal as a way to help us do the cast as broad and capture as many voices in as thorough and thoughtful a way as possible. At least that's my understanding.
Thank you, Joaquin. Joanne, are there any other hands raised?
Yes, we have Mike Daly with his hand raised.
Please unmute him.
Okay, Mike, you can unmute.
Yeah, members of the commission, ladies and gentlemen. ERSI, for instance, a software company, they have software that can create these districts. And if we have a circle, for instance, holds a maximum area for surface. And we could program the possible boundaries and the population and create compact boundaries and take most all of the work for the commission out of it. And I would think that would be quite a fair operation. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's actually kind of in my wheelhouse. So if I could just make a quick remark. I mentioned earlier that our lab is at the forefront of algorithmic methods to just assist in understanding what's possible in redistricting. And Mike Daly, you're referring to Esri, which is one of the important geospatial companies in the world. And, you know, Esri does have GIS software that lets you visualize districting and try to build districts by hand. And we and numbers of other groups have software that try to build districts by random processes. So you're seeing a picture of that behind me. This is a computer generated random districting art. But what I want to emphasize is that even though you can tell computers to look for compact plans and you can tell them about your criteria, computers can't make the value judgments about how to balance the criteria. And that's why it's so important that you have a diverse in terms of life stories, but also in terms of backgrounds, and invested commission that wants to hear from the public, because even the best computer methods are no replacement for people who try to interpret the rules and balance them.
Thank you. Hearing, I guess there are no more hands up, and are we done with the chat box, Joanne? I guess so. Okay, committee members, we've been working.
Does look like Raul Saga has his hand raised.
Okay.
And Robert Radigan also has his hand raised.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me for interrupting. I'm not one of the committee members, but I just wanted you to know that we as staff, we're recording this. We will also download the comments. So if for some reason we cannot get out to all of the comments in the chat box, we'll be happy to put those questions together and then run them by you or the committee or whoever you designate with some answers to have ready to either post or provide at the next meeting. Because obviously there's a lot of interest. We have over 120 participants at the moment. But whatever you decide, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, we can help accommodate to make sure that we get public comment taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Mr. Burciaga. Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Duchin, Mr. Delgadillo. Really appreciate the presentation. You know, one of the most difficult things that we have to do is to solicit, synthesize, and make use of the public comments. I mean, we want to hear from everybody throughout New Mexico, and the challenge is how do we distill that information? So we've heard from from legislatures that during previous sessions, they go on the road show, they solicit input from throughout the state, and then it's not really considered for multiple reasons, but one of those reasons is they don't know what to do with the information. It's very difficult to distill it. And so it seems to me like the tool that you presented today solves that, or begins to solve that very difficult challenge for us. It meets the needs of a tool that we need. It's well into development, or it's well into customization, which is important because you can't build one tool that's going to fit the needs of every redistricting committee around the country. And it's my understanding that this tool is already paid for. So that one's really good from a budgetary perspective. If I'm wrong about that, we can discuss that. So I'm very supportive of adopting this tool. And I think I want to address a couple of the comments that were made in the chat. There was one from Cosmic about to begin to address the concern he raised, we need a way to gather information from people around the state. And this is the tool that will begin to do that. And there was a question from Ms. De La Rosa about how much weight would be given to this. I think my understanding of how this works is that this is just a way for us as the committee members to make sense of information coming from 2 million New Mexicans. And I think it solves that problem. It's not going to be it's not going to be heavily or lightly weighted. It's just one way for us to take a lot of information and distill it for our consideration as the seven-member committee who has to ultimately make the difficult decisions around how to draw these maps. So I'm fully supportive of this tool. I do have a couple of questions for you, Dr. Duchin. I want to make sure, you've got the tribal areas in there. That's very important to us in New Mexico. And there's other communities that I think it would be helpful if we had those pre-populated. And I'm thinking about the colonias along the southern border of New Mexico. So I'm going to use that as an example of, is that something, could I send you the polygons for those colonias as they were defined, at least at some point 10, 15 years ago, so that we can have that as sort of a guideline for anybody who wants to draw one of those colonias. And the second question that I have is with regards to precincts. So most redistrictors, their building blocks are census blocks. But in our case, the Redistricting Act constrains us to precincts. So is the tool customized so that we're building districts with precincts rather than blocks?
Great. Okay, so let me address a few of the things you said. First of all, yes, you're exactly right. The motivation for launching Districtor, which we started, I think, 4 years ago, it's been in development for quite some time, was precisely what you flagged, which is public input has existed for as long as there's been a US, because redistricting is a long-standing American pastime / obsession. But there's been a real gap between the form that input comes in and the form that it might be most usable in to the line drawers. And that was precisely our motivation in sitting down and trying to think about how to bridge the gap with technology. So this is, I should mention too, this is a fully open source project. The code that we use behind Districtor is open and online. And in fact, we welcome contributions to people who want to join our open source community. So it's really a public oriented tool to make things free and maximally accessible in order to take that information from the sort of minds and from the microphones of your public hearings and make it visible to you as you draw. You asked if it would be possible to see custom geographies, and I would say we'd be thrilled to work with you we have a great geography team, and we'd be thrilled to take any, in some of our partners are interested in seeing school district boundaries. Some want to see municipalities or townships, and boroughs in Alaska and parishes in Louisiana, and all around the country. The relevant, the salient geography is a little bit different, and we'd be thrilled to work with you to help you visualize geography in a way that's most relevant to you in New Mexico. And then to your question about precincts, absolutely. Precincts are our preferred geographic unit for mapping all around the country. And as you, I'm sure, know very well, around the country, different states make the availability of their precinct shapefile either very easy or very hard to impossible. But in New Mexico, we have precinct boundaries, and those are our preferred units.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any, Lisa, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Justice. So just building on something Robert said, do we have the ability to put this portal up? Like, say we go to, we're up in San Juan County, right? And can we put the map up at the public meeting, and then people actually give input there, present, work on it? Like we have somebody trained to help do, this is my area, this is the area I feel like, this is my community of interest, so that we come out of our public meeting with, exactly what Robert was saying, people going on the roadshow, but not having the information at the end of the day, something that represents what we heard in public comment.
Absolutely. That's one of the major use cases we have in mind. And so when we were engineering the tool, we worked with experienced mappers around the country, like Karin McDonald in California, Fred McBride, who's done a great deal of mapping in Georgia, and they're accustomed to running live meetings, just exactly as you described. And so one of the major use cases we had in mind for the tool is that you could hold it in a public space, project a map on the screen, and draw in real time with people, and sort of, they'd be able to tell you a little to the left, a little to the right, and you could sort of input the region and the narrative live. So that, now, having said that, COVID happened and changed everyone's ideas about what public input would look like for this redistricting cycle. And we felt that Districtor was really well suited to the transition to Zoom, and other kind of online formats. But the use case that we had in mind from the drawing board was the one that you mentioned, where there'd be kind of public hearings and you'd draw live with people collaboratively.
Super helpful, thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Michael Sanchez.
Yes, sir.
If I might, Dr. Duchin, the only thing I'd like to have you acknowledge is that not all our indigenous tribes here in New Mexico speak Navajo. We have the Mescaleros and we also have the Pueblos. And so I would hope that you would keep that in mind when you're working on the portal.
Absolutely.
That's all I have, Chairman, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Just a quick reaction to that. When you build software like this, you think about what's called internationalization and localization. That's taking the software that you have and making it possible to swap out in a modular way pieces such as language support. And so our first language after English that you already heard is underway is Spanish support. But we're building that in a modular way so that if you can put us in touch with experts in any of the languages that you'd like supported, we'll be able to swap in the kind of text blocks to support as many languages as you can provide us partners.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Michael. There being nothing further, I would entertain a motion to ratify the agreement and to proceed along with building this public input portal.
Mr. Chair, can I just get clarity that that this tool could be implemented by the CRC without any cost to our budget?
I'll just say yes. The New Mexico customization is already paid for.
Thank you. I move to adopt the tool.
Yeah, I would second that. I would second that motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion by the members of the committee? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? I vote aye as well. The next item on the agenda is the public meetings. And keeping in mind that this is a proposal that I have made, and it is subject, of course, to the committee's deliberations. But just trying to think through the legislation, it requires us to go into the 4 regions and then central New Mexico, plus a hearing in one of the tribal lands. The State Ethics Committee staff have been very helpful in reaching out to a lot of different communities to get the expense of going to these various facilities. And what I've got in mind is 7 meetings to begin with, and then 7 at the end instead of the minimal 6. And what I have proposed is Santa Fe at the Capitol Building, Las Vegas at Highlands. I think we ought to look at Acoma Pueblo, that's where it took place 10 years ago, or the Laguna Pueblo as the venue from the tribal facilities. I'd like for us to consider Farmington and San Juan College, Roswell at Eastern New Mexico University, Las Cruces at New Mexico State University, and somewhere in Albuquerque. I'd recommended Bradbury Drive, address where many legislative hearings have taken place in the past. I will represent to the committee and to the public that Representative Maestas sent an email urging us to consider West Mesa High School as a venue for an Albuquerque meeting. Also, what I have in mind is exploring whether or not when we are in a particular region, let me use, for example, San Juan County, where they're in Farmington, I wondered if we might be able to create a satellite facility, perhaps using Western New Mexico University out of Gallup and using their technology, allow that community to get together there and present their testimony live. We would have somebody there to facilitate that discussion and try to do that throughout the quadrant so that we reduce the amount of travel that people have to endure in order to participate live. Of course, we will be doing this virtually. And so that's something else I would like to consider. I think we should also start our meetings mid-afternoon, 3 o'clock, and go into the evening so that people who cannot attend the meetings due to work will be able to participate during evening hours. I think we ought to take into consideration a Saturday as a schedule. And with that, I think that if we can we have to give 30 days notice for the first round of meetings. I think if we could settle on a calendar for all of the meetings, that would be great. And we would publish that right away and let the people know which communities we will go and on what dates. I would propose that we try to hold meetings for the first round from August 2nd through August 13th. That gives us 2 weeks to do 7 meetings. Come back. It'll be the middle of August when research and polling will get the legacy data from the Federal Bureau of Census and be able to digest that and input it into their computer programs. We could then, based on the information we receive from the public during those initial meetings and all the while on the portal, then we could draw some maps, hold a meeting to decide which maps to propose for the public, then go do our second round of meetings the last week of September and first week of October would be my thought. So with that in mind, it's a proposal out there to begin the discussion. I think first, if we can go to public comment, if there's any comment about the proposed sites and dates, I'd like to hear from you, or the committee would. Joanne, are there any hands up?
Hello, Justice Chavez. There are 2 hands up in the attendee room.
Okay,
no panel, actually 3 now.
Okay, will you just, in order that they raise their hand, would you please unmute them?
Sure. The first name I'm going to allow to talk is Richard Mason. You may unmute.
Justice Chavez, members of the committee, again, Dick Mason with the League of Women Voters of New Mexico. You know, I participated, I attended a lot of the meetings in 2011. One of the things I think you should be considering is parking capabilities and, where applicable, public transportation, whether the sites are available through public transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Okay.
Joanne?
Next is Chloe Jake. Chloe, you may unmute.
Hi, my name is Chloe Jake, and I'm the media coordinator for NEVA Education Project and NME to Vote. We'd like to propose that one of the public meetings occur at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This would provide a location that is central to the Pueblo of Isleta, the 5 Sandoval Pueblos, and members of the vast urban Native population that resides in Albuquerque. We have seen that the committee has already proposed that one meeting take place within the communities of either the Pueblo of Laguna or Acoma, and we'd just like to state our support for that proposal so that these Pueblos and adjacent Navajo and non-Native rural communities will have the opportunity to present their input as well. And I'd just like to reiterate the importance of holding multiple meetings in various Indigenous communities to accommodate the digital divide, the amount of travel, and the cultural diversity of these communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Joanne.
Next is Charlotte Little. Charlotte, you may unmute.
Thank you. My name is Charlotte Little. I'm with the NEVA Education Project. I echo the recommendations by my colleague Chloe Jake, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, also for recommending the meetings be taking place in regional areas. I would ask to consider in the northern area of New Mexico, also in the Española and specifically the 8 northern Pueblos area would be in the community of Okeowinge. I'd also like to recommend the holding one meeting at the Santa Fe Indian School campus and appreciate the opportunity to provide comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne, any other hands up?
Yes, we have 4 additional hands raised. The first is Jesse, NAVAEP intern. Jesse, you may unmute.
Hello, yat ish Jessibiaki Yinshe, Nakainishla, adults in Upney Bashishchin, Nakaidashanella, totally Nidashache. My name is Jessie Wiaki. I am Cochiti Zuni Navajo, and I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I am an intern with the NAVA Education Project. We'd like to propose that a public meeting occur at the Inn of the Mountain Gods with the consent of the Mescalero Apache tribe, of course. This would be beneficial for both the tribe and nearby rural communities who may be lacking in access to broadband or where extended travel may present difficulties considering the pandemic. And also the space is large enough to consider social distancing measures. Thank you, and we'd like to offer our support.
Thank you. Anyone else, Joanne?
Yes, we have Atsa Chavez. I apologize if I mispronounced your first name. You may, Atsa Chavez, you may unmute.
Shea Atsa Chavez Yunisha. It's good to see everyone today. Thank you for allowing for public comment. I wanted to mention that we would really appreciate having additional community meetings on sovereign nations. There are 23 New Mexico tribes, and each one of these sovereign nations have their own leadership. And it's insufficient to only have one to accommodate the cultural diversity that we have across the state, in particular because a lot of these areas lack broadband and would not be able to provide comment otherwise. This ensures the opportunity for tribal and rural communities to participate, and we would appreciate that request. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Joanne, next.
Next is Joseph Hernandez. Joseph Hernandez, you may unmute.
Greetings. Yate she Joseph Hernandez Yeneshe Hoganishle Nake Beshachi Eshintache Nake Deshanele. Again, I'm from Shiprock, New Mexico, and I work for NAVA Education Project. I'm a net energy organizer up here, and I am well familiar with the communities, especially on Navajo. And I could tell you right now that that they are starting to have in-person meetings. We just had a tribal leadership meeting that came together just a couple of days ago at Diné College, a Shiprock campus, and the interim committee is going to be having a meeting there next this coming week. So definitely, I recommend what my colleagues and everybody else is recommending. Again, we have to reach out, come out to Navajo tribal communities, in addition to the other communities that were mentioned, but specifically tribal communities. And I do recommend, Diné College Shiprock campus here in Shiprock. They have the internet connectivity. They have the space to handle, a community meeting, and also additional community meetings out in Crown Point. And I definitely do recommend, for this process to have that tribal engagement. I think that's really critical and really important, especially with that learning and understanding of how this will impact, tribal communities. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Joanne?
Next is Amber Carrillo. Amber, you may unmute.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kuatsi Hopa. My name is Amber Carrillo, and I'm from the Pueblo of Laguna. I was one of the applicants to the Citizens Redistricting Committee, and I just want to make mention of that because it is quite relevant to the discussion happening today. And but in regards to the current set of statements relevant to the discussion, I do want to suggest that there be greater engagement with the tribal communities, and there are many venues in any of the Native American communities throughout the state that can accommodate a really deep conversation regarding redistricting. So I do support the idea that the Indian Public Cultural Center definitely be considered. Early on, we had heard that there was some discussion regarding that, and so I support it. The other thing that's really important about making sure that tribal communities are deeply engaged and that there are meetings held in their communities is the fact that transportation for Native Americans is very difficult. We talk about the digital divide, but transportation is still a major issue for our tribal communities, and so it serves them so well for people to be cognizant of the obstacles that Native Americans face when they are working hard to engage on civic matters. And I really, want to help kind of help us think about Native Americans in a different way, because so often people think of us as not being interested in democratic principles and mobilization efforts, but it's actually quite contrary. We are very interested, and I think we get disinterested if people don't appeal to us, and if you don't reach out to us, and if you don't have a sincere approach to us, then we do feel like people aren't paying attention to our needs and to who we are. And so I ask very respectfully and with deep empathy for our communities that you consider more than one meeting in tribal areas, and that you consider meeting with all of our tribal communities. We have 23 tribes in New Mexico. We have the Navajo Nation, we have the 19 Pueblos, we have the Mescalero Apaches, we have the Jicarilla Apache Nation, and the Fort Sill Apache, and all of them matter. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Amber. Joanne, anybody else?
We have one hand raised at this time. It looks like an organization name, San Juan Dems Admin.
Okay.
Yes, you can unmute.
And have them identify themselves by name.
San Juan.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please identify your name.
Yes, I will. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Yaho, Yate. My name is Songtree Payochi. I am Vice Chair of the San Juan County Democratic Party and also the Vice Chair of the Native American Democratic Caucus of New Mexico. And thank you for giving me the chance to speak. I live in Bloomfield, and hearing the 6 places that you proposed, I would like to echo my colleagues and also considering meeting on tribal lands. The drive from Crown Point, for instance, to Farmington or San Juan College is approximately 1 hour and 30 minutes. Also from Shiprock to Farmington, it's 45 minutes. And these roads aren't friendly. And so I think that would give also a good perspective of not only the road conditions, but the distance that people have to travel without public transportation, and also the chance to appreciate the beauty of our lands. I am enrolled member of the Pueblo of Taos and Oglala Lakota. And so I would also appreciate seeing a meeting more closer to the northern tribe, the northern Pueblos and Jicarilla Apache. I thank you for all of your hard work, and you have a good day.
Thank you very much. Are there any other hands raised, Joanne?
I don't see any other hands in the attendee room.
Thank you very much. Committee, what is your pleasure?
I just have a comment. I apologize. Chris, we haven't heard from you. Would you like to go ahead?
No, that's fine. Please, please, Lisa, I will be happy to follow.
Yeah, I too have great concern about Native American participation throughout the state. And I have a question for the people that have been kind enough to voice their thoughts about this, because I know it's going to be very important that we take testimony from the All Pueblo Council of Governors, from the governors of the individual tribes, from all the leadership. And I know that the tribes are meeting right now to help with this job in redistricting. I want to understand if we were to hold, if say the governors from the four quadrants were at, if we had a convenient time, would they want to be part of the general public meeting? I thought Mr. Montoya's statement about splitting up the commission potentially so that we could do twice as much work was an interesting idea that I think the committee should explore. But I wanted to understand if you see the Native American, the governors coming and giving public comment in those 4 quarter meetings, or and if that would accommodate some of the issues, or and I like the idea of holding it on Native American land at the at our Albuquerque Center for all the tribes. And so I just want to know more whether, if we have specific time blocked out, if we can accommodate specifically the tribes in the particular quadrants, because the map issue that we were talking about earlier, making sure that people can draw and we can see it and we know what those communities of interest are and where they are and that they can be part of the broader discussion. I just want to know if you think that that's helpful or not in the basic public meetings.
Joanne, are there any hands raised to respond to Lisa?
Yes, I see 2 hands raised at this time. The first is Amber Carrillo.
Please unmute her.
Amber, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. I'm not able to unmute her.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the question, Committee Member Curtis. I believe that it would be a great conversation to undertake with the various tribes of New Mexico. Perhaps if you could reach out to them. I can be of assistance when it comes to the All Pueblo Council of Governors and with the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center. But I do believe it's important that we have at least regional meetings in the north, the south, and the west. But I also would suggest that, I don't think that this is an answer or this is a question that can be answered immediately. I think that we should do a little due diligence with this and reach out to the leadership, the various leadership, to ask them what's most appropriate for them. That's a suggestion, but I am definitely here to help if I can be of service. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Carrillo.
Okay, next is Lauren. Lauren, you may unmute.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity. My name is Lauren Bernelling. I'm with the Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission. Our office has been involved in redistricting activities for several past years now, since the decennial counts have started back in 2000. And I think I want to echo what Amber has said. We've been meeting, and certainly Navajo would be very much interested in entertaining a meeting on the Navajo Nation. We cover such a vast land base here in New Mexico. And so I would really be interested in talking more with respect to bringing a meeting to the Navajo Nation. Thank you.
Next we have Atza Chavez. You may unmute.
Thank you, Ms. Curtis, for the question. I would just like to state that we are helping to lead the Native Redistricting Coalition across the state. And so we would also be welcome to help any sort of coordination or feedback that you would like to get with the tribal communities. Thank you.
And the last hand we have raised is Casey Duma. Casey, you may unmute.
Thank you, committee. I appreciate the question, and I think the importance of really being able to meet on tribal lands is very important. I think given the opportunities to have these specific conversations around tribal input regarding especially communities of interest, those things are very important as far as being able to provide that type of input during the general sessions. I really think, the tribes will, I'm speaking on behalf of Pueblo of Laguna. I think the Pueblo will be engaged in as many of those discussions as we can, but I think the more dedicated sessions towards tribal communities, the better. There's a lot of representation throughout the whole state, and certainly I don't believe one meeting can accommodate all the various input as well as the interest. There's a lot of groundwork being done with tribal governments and mobilizing them to provide that input. So I think having the dedicated time to really capture that will help inform the entire committee of the various nature of input from around the whole state. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that it, Joanne?
I do not see any other hands raised at this time.
Thank you, Joanne. Christopher, you wanted to comment?
Thank you, Justice. And actually, I wanted to circle back to a comment that you made. You made a comment earlier that it might be possible to have either participation through a video stream or some form of expanding, if you will, the scope of that meeting. To me, that sounds like something that we absolutely should look into. We have over 100 people listening in today from all over the place. Everybody's able to participate. It seems like this should be something we should be able to do. What I'm not certain of, and perhaps this is a question to you, Justice, or to anyone else who might have an answer. Mr. Montoya on the chat did ask a question if the committee could split up. Is that allowed? Could we do that? Because if we could, going back to, I believe, what Ms. Curtis said, I think it makes sense. And we can just participate by video and we can expand our reach. So is that possible to split the committee for the information gathering meetings?
I don't know because of the quorum requirements that we are about to vote on, number one. And number two, my thought was to have somebody that would actually be there in person to help facilitate the discussion, help them through districtor at each facility. And I think if we use the universities and their satellites, that's going to reduce a lot of travel for people. And we would certainly need to have somebody that is trained to be able to help the community to actually make their presentation. I think when they show up as a community in a group, what you could do is if you're at San Juan College, you could listen to those folks. If you had a satellite facility in Gallup or Shiprock, you could then listen to them and just take them in order so that all the committee members would have the benefit of what is being said. I think that's important for the committee as a whole, as a quorum, to hear from the people and for other people to also hear so that they can assess what others think about what they should do with a particular map or portion of a map. So I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for your question. I just think that's probably not doable, but it's something we ought to explore with a lawyer. Joaquin.
Chavez?
Yes, Joanne.
Oh, I apologize. We do have one attendee with their hand raised at this time. I didn't know if you wanted to address the member's question first or the attendee's question next.
I had already acknowledged Joaquin, and then
sorry.
We had finished with public comments, but I'll get back to the individual. Let me hear from Joaquin.
Yes, thank you, Justice. Just two things. One is that I appreciate Mr. Montoya's creativity, but I'd prefer to hear all the testimony firsthand and not have it filtered through others' interpretation. And so that I could hear firsthand from the communities that we're going to engage with. And then the other, and this is, I mean, this is a really good problem that we're having, is that lots of people want to share their testimony. So I think that's a great problem to have. And so I think part of this is that could we use some of our resources to figure out a technological fix for this, so that, and I think this is what you were referring to, Justice, maybe we have one designated spot, but we have 3 or 4 satellite places that could join at the same time. So that's not my expertise. I don't know how to deal with that, but there seems to be that could be something we explore. Even if we do have one central location, there could be satellite locations to that.
Joanne, let's take that one more comment from the public.
Okay, the person's name is Joanne Velo. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. Joanne, you may unmute.
Thank you. I live in La Mesa, which is about 17 miles south of Las Cruces. If you have the program at, or the meeting in Las Cruces at NMSU, it's about 35 miles to Sunland Park and then another 20 miles to Hatch. The rural areas are not going to be able to make it. I think that the idea of satellites is a good idea. I'm also was born and raised in Tularosa, which is close to the Apache tribe, the Mescalero Apache tribe. And that would be a good location because it's in between kind of Las Cruces and Roswell, although at least the communities of Tularosa, Carrizozo, Ruidoso, and Alamogordo would be able to attend that one. So the problem is we have too much land, not enough broadband.
Thank you, Joanne. Committee members? Robert?
Mr. Chairman, this is Michael Sanchez.
Yes, sir.
And it is a problem in terms of only one location for our indigenous population. I suggest that we reconsider the one area and try to come up with at least a second area on tribal land where these meetings could occur. And I also, in terms of Mr. Saucedo, and in terms of breaking up the committee, I don't believe it would be appropriate based on the legislation, the language in the legislation, and the issue of a quorum as well. Not that that's not a bad idea. I just don't think the legislation allows for it. But I know in the past that tribal leaders have, in fact, gotten together, worked together to make their presentation not only to the legislature, but also back when these matters went before the courts. And they came in with a unified voice, and I suspect that's still going to happen. I would hope that's going to happen because that's a very important part of our culture or history here in the state of New Mexico. But again, I don't know where the other meeting should be held, but I certainly believe that there should be another meeting held somewhere on tribal land in the state of New Mexico. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I knew that this work would not be easy and we'd have a lot of difficult decisions to make, and I think this is one of our first ones. I really appreciate the input, particularly from the Native American community, that they want to see more meetings on their land, and I think that we need to give that due consideration. I think we also have to recognize the fact that we need to make a decision this evening as to where the first rounds of meetings are so we can comply with the Open Meetings Act and give 30 days notice. So what I would suggest we entertain is that perhaps we, another consideration too is, we must, we're not bound by the number of meetings we have or the upper limit of the number of meetings we have, right? So we need to have at least 12. We're proposing 14. We can't really do that many more given our timeline and our budget. And as the most recent public commenter said, we're a big state, and wherever we decide to hold these meetings, people are going to have to drive if they want to be there in person. There's just no other way about it. So what I am suggesting to the committee is that we consider adopting the 7 proposed locations, because we know they will meet our needs, and we can get those public notices out so that folks know we're going to have a meeting in their community in 30 days. And that we reconsider where we're going to have the next round of meetings. We don't necessarily have to have them at the same 7 locations. Maybe this is just the start, and at a future meeting, we figure out where to have the next round of meetings. But something to consider.
I have lost our chair. Does anybody else see our chair?
No, I didn't know if I was supposed to yield back or what.
I'm going to assume that Justice Chavez is having a little technical difficulty. I was just going to jump in and say, Robert, I like your idea because it keeps us moving, but I do want to consider holding an additional meeting with our Native American communities based on what I heard from the people that spoke up, that having some discussion, inside their groups would likely yield more of an answer about what would work best. And so adopting the slate that we have now, and perhaps looking at adding another meeting on tribal land during the time period. The other thing, just from a quorum standpoint, for a lawyer, I mean, there are a number of us that are lawyers on this. I mean, you can get a quorum over Zoom. Okay, I mean, so if we're doing, we're doing something in Silver City at the college there, and we're doing something at Las Cruces, and we're doing them at the same time, and we split the committee up so that we have members that are representative in both areas, we still have a quorum. So it just might be a way of trying to make sure as many people feel heard and are heard, but then we'd all still be present on the same Zoom. So to Joaquin's point, that it's not filtered, that we're not holding them separately, but maybe, because I think Christopher might have been going that direction when he first made that suggestion, that we just put ourselves in different locations, but at the same time, so we're all hearing the same information. So anyway, that was my thought. I know Justice Chavez might have a little trouble getting back to us, so I'm going to take a minute and try to find him, and then I'll just let the committee do whatever it wants to do in talking about this issue going forward. But I'm gonna go mute for a second.
Nope, there he is.
I think we got him back.
I'm on my phone. I guess that was my computer that's frozen. I'm going to try to reboot. What is the committee's pleasure?
So I would I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this is Michael Sanchez. So my motion would be that we add another meeting within the context of the dates that we have on one of the tribal lands, whether in Shiprock or the Mescalero or the All Indian Pueblo Council building. It just seems from the information that we got from the tribes that would be appropriate, but I think that would be my motion, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
May I get a clarification, Mr. Sanchez?
Absolutely.
Is that to add what to the venues that are being proposed?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. The motion is to add an additional tribal land hearing in addition to those venues that are proposed in the exhibit. Is there a second?
I would second that motion, and I would add only that we should get input from the leadership of the tribes so that we know where that is most effectively done.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I think this is a great idea, and I think what we can do as a committee is, if we get the help from the State Ethics Commission staff, we can start reaching out as early as tomorrow, and I would suggest that there are a few people, Amber, Hetza, that have offered to assist us in this regard, and we ought to reach out to them and take advantage of the opportunity to schedule a meeting. So that's my input. If there are no further comments from the committee. Any further comments? I'm sorry, I'm on my phone and I've got one person on the screen that is all.
This
Is there a
Joaquin.
committee member?
Yeah,
Joaquin, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, apologize. So my question is, are we also attaching dates to each of these locations, or are we doing that separately?
We could do that this evening if you'd like, but without having identified the venues. And I will tell you that we have reached out to a number of the pueblos, and they still haven't made a decision about opening. And they indicated that it would be sometime in July. I don't know if that happened yesterday or happened today, but we're not going to be able to actually set a venue. But if we can agree on those dates, then as soon as possible, we ought to schedule them and make sure that the venues are actually available on a particular date. And I would suggest that we try to do it in a way that we travel from venue to venue and get it accomplished within 2 weeks, and including on a Saturday. Maybe take advantage of Saturdays.
Definitely.
Anything else from the committee?
I have one suggestion on the dates. Can we add the weekend after? Because I think if I saw it correctly, the 13th is a Friday. And
Add the 14th?
Add the 14th and the 15th, so we have that Saturday and Sunday, just to try to accommodate what you had said, Chair, about the weekend, because I think the weekends could be really helpful.
Mr. Sanchez, would you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so the motion would take us dates available through the 15th. And that's certainly fine with me as well. Any other comments from the committee? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. We will go with the schedule of venues. We will explore the use of satellite facilities as well. And we will look into an additional tribal land meeting venue. And we will begin working on that ASAP. It's the 4th of July weekend, so I suspect that it won't be till the 5th of July that we can in earnest begin that effort. And I will report back to the committee. I have shut down. I don't have any paper. All I've got is my computer, which froze. So I can't even tell you what is on the next agenda until I get this up and running. Somebody will tell me what is on the agenda next.
Mr. Chair,
Rules of procedure are next, sir.
I'm sorry.
Rules of procedure are next, sir.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, the rules of procedure. Next item on the agenda. And these are rules that I have proposed. And what they largely do is they provide for what the committee members, committee staff, and committee contractors can do. There's a scope which is limited to the public hearings that are available. And the whole purpose is to let the public know what it is that we can and will receive as commentary during this process. There's a definition section in there that defines just a few terms for the sake of clarity. We also have repeated much of what is written in the Redistricting Act, the idea being to include within that, have everything in one document. In other words, sure don't have it memorized, but the section that I know the committee really wants to discuss is the ex parte communication section. And what is intended by that particular provision is for committee members, committee staff, and committee contractors not to have private discussions with individuals other than each other regarding issues solely related to portions of maps or full maps. that are being proposed. If somebody wanted to discuss with you privately how to draw a map that would satisfy their particular interest, you should encourage them to make their presentation at a public meeting. If they want to have that discussion with you, the only requirement following that discussion is for you to reveal the matter at the next meeting, so that the entire public knows what somebody believed was important as far as how a map should be drawn. It's important, I think, so that the public is aware of what is being proposed, can either agree with it or disagree with it. Because the bottom line is, anytime we start drawing these maps and looking at communities of interest, we're going to affect other districts, we're going to affect other areas in our district. And it's a matter of just being as open as possible with the communities. I want to see the committee members to go out and speak to groups, get on radio talk shows, get on TV, whatever we can do to educate the public and help them through this process and help them actively participate. But I also want the entire public and all of the committee members to have the benefit of anybody's thoughts on the drawing of a portion of a map or a full state map. And that's the reason for this particular proposal. And that's the ex parte rule. The rest of it is basically just summarizing what the act has to say with respect to what we consider, the criteria that we have to consider. It also spells out that the quorum requirement would be for 4 members, would constitute a quorum. A majority of the quorum would authorize business. I also ask that if approved, that you allow me as the chair to act on behalf of the committee to enter into contracts and interagency agreements, including agreements to provide for professional, technical, or legal services as necessary. So that's in there, which you may or may not agree to. There's a provision for per diem and mileage for those of you who want to collect that. The rules are specific there. It's in the map drawing. If a member works with a contractor to draw a map, they would like to propose for adoption. At a meeting where the resulting map is proposed, the member will describe the criteria that they asked for that resulted in the map and why the map complies with state and federal law. It's nothing that forecloses a committee member from meeting with Brian Sanderoff, for example, and having him draw a map based on criteria. Eventually, if you want to propose such a map, then during a public meeting, you would explain to the public what it is that you proposed and the criteria that you utilized. Again, that's just being transparent and allowing for the public to comment on each of the proposed maps. We will have a meeting that follows these public input meetings on communities of interest, where we will discuss amongst ourselves what maps we will actually decide to propose for adoption. And then we will make another round of these 7 or 8 meetings and go ahead and obtain yet more public input. And then finally, we will decide on adopted maps, and then we have to evaluate the maps. There's a provision in the rules that allow us that explain how we plan to have those maps evaluated. They cannot be evaluated with partisan data until after the maps are adopted by the committee and ready to be sent to the legislature. And that it requires not only that we evaluate our compliance with the Redistricting Act, but with federal law, the Voting Rights Amendment, but it also calls for a partisan fairness measurement. And that measurement is a proposed measurement at this point that would require an ensemble of maps to be used to compare to the maps adopted by the committee. And there will be 3 different measures that will be proposed. We will hire an expert for that purpose. It will not be research and polling. And I've already got somebody in mind I've talked to that I think would be a credible candidate to help us with the evaluations. And then we have to talk about a lawyer, no New Mexico lawyer applied to offer advice to the committee. But fortunately, the Harvard election law clinic has agreed to represent the committee pro bono. And so we will have legal representation. So with that, that's a description of the rules, largely from my memory. I would like to open it up to the public for comment. I'm going to try to get back on my computer so that I can see exactly what is going on. But with that, Joanne, Ryan, did you have a comment?
No, I did not. My dogs were going crazy. I apologize.
Okay. All right. So with that, Joanne, are there any hands raised?
Yes, Justice Chavez, we have 8 hands raised. 8 hands raised. The first name listed is John Block. John Block, you may unmute.
Good afternoon, Justice Chavez and members of the committee. My name is John Block. I'm a native New Mexican and I live in Alamogordo. I have grave concerns regarding Rule 10A, which I believe to be voter suppression because voters, including communities of interest, are not allowed to speak directly to the members of the committee about district maps, which defeats the entire purpose of the citizens being involved in the Citizens Redistricting Committee. There are only 7 public meetings across the state, now 8, I believe, and this restriction troubles me because if someone cannot make it to the meeting in their area, and then Rule 10A would bar them from participating in the process by contacting members of the committee about their concerns, which I believe is un-American and against the public's involvement in the process. Please consider taking out Rule 10A to promote transparency. As well, I would also like to note that I believe only New Mexicans should be allowed to comment in the portal, and I believe we should verify their locations by their voting addresses. And this would limit outside groups from trying to rig our redistricting process with outside influence. So thank you, Justice Chavez and members of the committee.
Thank you. Joanne?
The next name listed is Oriana Sandoval. You may now unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Oriana Sandoval, I'm the director of the Center for Civic Policy based out of Albuquerque, but we do statewide civic engagement work. And I urge the commission to please reject Part 10, Sections 8 through E. We are concerned that ex parte regulations are going to severely limit access of community members to the commissioners. And really, commissioners, you are our conduit to map making and to public input. And as we saw with the previous section of the agenda, there are limited meetings in limited regions of the state. And really, we need as much access, unfettered access, and meaningful access for our communities to our commissioners. Progress. So thank you.
Next, we have James Povihua. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. James, you may go ahead and unmute.
Thank you, members of the committee. My name is James Povihua, and I am the policy director for the Center for Civic Policy. And I am also a member of Okeowinge Pueblo, which is one of the 19 pueblos and 23 tribes in our state. I want to extend my appreciation to the members of the committee for your willingness to serve on this committee and look forward to supporting your hard work to ensure an equitable redistricting process. However, appointees to this committee do not adequately represent the diversity of our state. Not a single member of the commission is from a tribal community. There are no Black or Asian American representatives, and members are primarily from the Albuquerque-Bernalillo area. This is why the ex parte rule that you are considering today is so harmful, because it will only prevent the public and vast majority of New Mexicans who, as a demographic, you do not fully represent from participating in the redistricting process. It will also significantly reduce the opportunities you all may have for consultation with stakeholders who are not among your fellow committee members. In addition to the numerous reasons Center for Civic Policy Director Oriana Sandoval noted, if passed, the way that the ex parte rule is written now would also serve to further a negative perception harbored among Black, Indigenous, and people of color community members throughout the state around equity and inclusion in our political process. And it may also be seen as yet another example of systemic practices that, intentionally or unintentionally, serve to erode, diminish, and erase the voices of our communities within our country and our state's political and civic engagement processes. This concludes my remarks, and I respectfully urge committee members to vote against the ex parte rule in its entirety and commit to creating as open a process as possible for community engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Any others with their hands up?
Yes, we have next Paul Mitchell. Paul, you may unmute.
Thank you very much. My name is Paul Mitchell. I'm a demographer and redistricting consultant working with multiple redistricting commissions such as your own. Largely, we're working in California and Arizona, including redistricting commissions for the cities of Los Angeles, San Jose, Long Beach, Oakland, and Mesa, Arizona. Our firm is extremely supportive of the commission process, and we're happy to be a resource for you as you move forward. As your commission was being formed, our firm, including California commissioners Connie Malloy and Angelo Anchetta, spent time reviewing your regulations, and I wanted to call specifically to address these ex parte communication items, as they may sound strict, but they are fairly standard in commission-based redistricting, and they are crucial for maintaining transparency and gaining the public's trust. Whenever I do a redistricting, whether it's a city, county, commission, or other, our firm generally has one early ground rule. We do not engage with those making the decisions on redistricting or those impacted by the redistricting, meaning the elected officials, outside of the public eye. That means we ask commissioners and elected officials to not call us directly or text us or send us DMs on Twitter. There's simply no back channels to myself or my staff. And this accomplishes two key things. One, it protects the public's confidence in the process. No matter what we do in redistricting, if a member of the public asks, we can readily say that we have had no side conversations, no emails, no conversations about lines, no discussions about who's running for what seat, absolutely no private undisclosed engagement with the politicians or the commissioners, no smoke-filled back rooms. It also avoids legal exposure. As commissioners and myself as a demographer, there's a mutual interest in us being able to say, we never talked about redistricting outside of a public meeting, or say, all of our communication was documented and shared with the public. It's not that just I want to say this, it's that I want to be able to honestly say it under oath if there is a legal proceeding. Generally, we find if it's worth saying in a public session. There's an enormous opportunity to weigh in during the 14 public hearings that you're setting. And if the public can't make a meeting, they can communicate through that online portal that you're going to be using. There will be more ways than ever for residents to have their voice heard. And this is even more true in your circumstance, this need for really strong ex parte communication restrictions. Your commission has not been given full authority to adopt and implement redistricting maps. Your plans are going to go to the legislature for them to adopt or reject and replace with their own. Your only stock in trade is the public trust and confidence. If the public believes your commission has done its work in an ethical, fair, and honest manner, above and beyond the requirements, then you may have the public pressure necessary to have the legislature adopt your maps. So I would urge you to take every opportunity to give the public confidence that the work you're doing is not being done behind closed doors, that it's not being driven by elected officials, that it's being done for the public and in the public eye. And if you do that, I believe the public will support your final work product and demand that the legislature adopt one of your redistricting plans without changes. And I want to thank you for hearing my comments. I am happy to be a resource for you and your commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne, next.
Next is Keegan King. Keegan, you may unmute.
Thank you, commissioners. I appreciate today's meeting. My name is Keegan King. I'm from the Pueblo of Acoma, and I'm also a member of the Redistricting Committee for the All Pueblo Council of Governors. As Amber Carrillo mentioned, the All Pueblo Council of Governors is working hard to ensure that the voices of our tribes are heard in this redistricting cycle, and it's essential that the governors, tribal leadership, are able to speak with you as commissioners to talk about what fair representation looks like. We've already heard about access issues, about the need to have more meetings. And unless we can have 23 separate meetings in 23 separate tribal communities, it's not clear to me how we'll be able to hear the perspective of New Mexico's sovereign nations. So as many others have said on the call, we urge you to support, or excuse me, urge you to oppose the ex parte ban. It's essential and it's a critical function for tribal leaders to be able to reach out and talk with commissioners about what's happening in the community, especially when there has been such a restriction on access for many of our tribal leaders living in remote areas. Being able to even join on a Zoom meeting is sometimes out of the question. So it's important for us that tribal leadership is able to get in contact. And again, I ask that you oppose the ex parte communication ban. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne, next.
Next is Susan Bowe. Susan, you may unmute.
Thank you. My name is Susan Bowe, and I'm president of the New Mexico Board of Foundation for Open Government. And we're a nonpartisan organization and have been for 31 years here in the state. And we are very impressed with the proposed rules, especially the provision that prohibits ex parte communication. Transparency is very important to us. We've advocated for it for 31 years. Many of the committee members made just wonderful comments today about this democratic process. Well, the touchstone and the key to democracy is transparency, and that's what we believe that these proposed rules, including the ban on ex parte communications, provides. We spend a lot of time talking with citizens who call us, and when I was listening to the presentation about the proposed website, the thought that came to me was, what a wonderful opportunity for civic engagement, that there's really no barrier to anyone providing not only their input, but also their the proposed map. And certainly our organization will not be submitting a map because we're really concerned about process. And the commitment also to follow the Open Meetings Act, we applaud you for that. So thank you to the committee.
Next is Mary H. Smith. Mary, you may unmute.
Thank you and good afternoon to you all. I am Mary H. Smith, an Albuquerque attorney and the League of Women Voters of Central New Mexico liaison to Fair Districts for New Mexico. As a longtime open government advocate and a friend of Susan Bowe, who just spoke to you, I am delighted that the Redistricting Act mandates the committee's compliance with the Open Meetings Act. I do, however, want to point out a specific rule being proposed today that gives me some concern, and that's Rule 10A. The Open Meetings Act, Section 10-15-1B, describes a meeting as, quote, all meetings of a quorum of members, end quote, of a public body held for the purpose of formulating public policy, discussing public business, or taking action. Proposed Rule 10A, ex parte communication, states in part, a member of the committee may not engage in any private communication with any individual other than committee members. I would caution committee members not to engage in Open Meetings Act prohibited rolling quorums, where one member discusses a matter of public business with another member, and then another member, and so on until a quorum of the committee has discussed that matter outside of a properly convened public meeting. An Open Meetings Act violation requires a do-over at a properly convened open meeting to cure the violation, and I urge the committee to avoid that process altogether. Just prohibit ex parte communications, period. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Joanne, next.
Next is Richard Mason. Richard, you may unmute.
Yes, Justice Chavez and members of the Redistricting Committee, my name is Dick Mason, and I'm chair of the Action Committee for the League of Women Voters of New Mexico. And we urge you to support Section 10 in its entirety. This is key for public confidence in the redistricting process. The CRC has adopted the district R that allows maximum public input, but assures that all CRC members and the public will have access to that communication. If ex parte is, if it's allowed, that means that CRC members will be besieged by legislators who may try to protect their own districts. So for public comment and for public confidence in the redistricting process, we urge you to adopt Section 10 in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne, next.
Next, we have NM Ethics Watch. You may unmute, and also if you can identify your name.
Yes, hi, this is Kathleen Sabo. I'm the Executive Director of New Mexico Ethics Watch. And I realize we're going to take a position here that is contrary to some of that, to the position of some of our fellow advocates, but we're making an assumption that there will be meaningful committee interaction with the portal. And maybe that's something we need to hear more about, an assurance of that. But if there is that meaningful interaction, we would encourage the committee to adopt the rules as drafted. As drafted, they do provide, in conjunction with the portal, for maximum public transparency. We've seen through the demonstration with Dr. Duchin how robust and interactive that portal can be. And so we do encourage adoption of the rules as drafted. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne?
Next we have Michaela Gallegos. Michaela, you may unmute.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Michaela Gallegos, and I am an organizer with New Mexico Working Families Political Organization, as well as a registered member of the Working Families Party Minor Party. I am here today to ask you to please strike Rule 10. In my work, we often work with members in rural parts of New Mexico. The lack of broadband, the amount of travel time that has been stated multiple times by multiple speakers today, as well as I want to bring up childcare. It is often hard for hardworking families to get off of work, find someone to watch their children, to attend these public forums and participate. There's issues where where's dinner? Is there going to be interpretation? By relying solely on public hearings and the portal, you're assuming everyone has access to strong broadband, they understand the language, there is not a language barrier, and that they have the opportunity to submit this and participate in that forum. We are again asking you to please strike the ex parte communications so we can have as many New Mexicans fully participate and the process can truly represent New Mexico. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joanne?
Next we have Kayla. Kayla, you may unmute. Kayla, you are currently unmuted. Oh, no, you're currently muted, sorry.
Justice Chavez and members of the committee, my name is Kayla Herring with Planned Parenthood in New Mexico. The work of the Citizens Redistricting Committee is critical to ensuring that all New Mexicans have equal access to political representation in New Mexico for the next 10 years. To ensure an accessible and transparent process, all New Mexicans' voices need to be heard, and the ex parte rule will greatly restrict their ability to make their voices heard. Although this rule would still allow people to email comments or testify at meetings, it would not allow for important conversations and question and answer time with commission members. These commissioners are the voices for communities that are often left out or disenfranchised, which makes it crucial to remove restrictions for communication rather than adding them. We urge you not to adopt the ex parte rule and to create as many opportunities for public and working family input through weekend and evening meetings, for as much community education as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Joanne, next.
Next, we have Jacob Vigil. Jacob, you may unmute.
Good afternoon, Justice Chavez and members of the committee. My name is Jacob Vigil. I'm with New Mexico Voices for Children. We also oppose the adoption of Rule 10, the ex parte rules, for many of the reasons that were already voiced by my colleagues. We believe that these committee meetings should be accessible as possible to ensure that the public can participate as much as possible. Along with many of the other organizations here, we worked hard in the last couple of years to ensure an accurate census count, to make sure that communities knew their participation was part of their political representation. And this commission is a part of where that census data will be translated into fair representation for New Mexico's diverse communities. So for this reason, it's crucial that community members be allowed to advocate on behalf of their needs. And it's for this very reason that the Citizens Redistricting Committee was created, to learn and listen to the needs of communities across the state on how they envision fair representation in the state's maps. So we hope the commission will adhere to this purpose and decline to adopt the proposed rule. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Joanne, next.
Next, we have Amber Carrillo. Amber, you may unmute.
Thank you, Justice Chavez and members of the committee. I want to bring light to the issue here that I really appreciate the folks who are speaking, and many of them are colleagues and allies, but I do want to bring attention to the fact that Native Americans have such diminished access to legislators and decision makers, and I think we're also very clear that this committee has also been looked at for the lack of ethnic diversity and geographic representation, but we still believe that you all can do a great job. However, it's important that members of tribal communities who don't have access to the internet and to the portal have a way to communicate with you. And I think far too often we think that good government means that there's this really hard divide between citizens and decision makers. But in reality, what we should be thinking is that because citizens are supporting decision makers, we should then have access at any time. And at any time, we should be able to share our concerns, share our values, share our ideas, and share what we believe is right and good and healthy for democracy and the things that we pursue, and especially the important decisions that will be made in redistricting. We also feel that the important issue that is pervading our community still is COVID-19. And Justice Chavez, you did a great job of mentioning that many of our pueblos still are being very cautious about their communities, and therefore their movement is limited to some extent. However, they do have, as tribal leaders, they are, doing their best to go to the places that are necessary. And so it's important that access be completely wide open. And I know people talk about standards. Standards are things that we've had for a really long time. They don't necessarily mean that it's something that we should continue to do. I think some standards are great, of course, but life is not static and change occurs. And so what applies very well for some situations, may not apply well for others. But I think it's really important to take into consideration the perspective from which we all come from. And the Native Americans' perspective is one that we do not have access, and we really do need the opportunity to share our voices at every possible turn as the redistricting process occurs. So we ask that you do not adopt the ex parte rules as a part of the committee's rules and procedures, that you take into deep consideration where people are at and how difficult things are for them still at this time, but their interest and willingness to participate in democracy is very high. Thank you.
Member Joanne, any other hands up?
Yes, we have 4 hands remaining. The next is Chloe Jake. Chloe Jake, you may unmute.
Hi, thank you again for providing me additional time to speak on behalf of the Native Redistricting Coalition. I'd like to ask a question that addresses another proposed rule. 11B2 and 3, page 7, the procedures state that the committee will not consider maps sent to the commission that are not sent in a common format, such as a sheet file. Again, to bring up the issue of the digital divide that presents a barrier for so many in New Mexico, will the committee accept hand-drawn maps as well, or can you explicitly name the formats that will be acceptable, please and thank you.
Would you try to answer that during our discussions? Whether or not we will accept hand-drawn maps? Next, Joanne.
The next name is Uriel Rosales. Uriel, you can unmute.
Thank you. Justice Chavez and members of the committee, my name is Uriel Rosales, and I am a community organizer with the New Mexico Dream Team in Southern New Mexico. I am here to ask you not to adopt the ex parte rules as part of the committee's rules and procedures. The Citizens Redistricting Committee is not a quasi-judicial body. Therefore, it is not appropriate to have ex parte rules regulating commissions between the public and commissioners. Ex parte rules are not a practice followed by other states that have independent redistricting commissions like California or Colorado. Once again, I'm asking you not to adopt the ex parte rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Uriel. Next.
Next, we have Mario Jimenez. Mario, you may unmute.
Hello, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Mario Jimenez again with Common Cause New Mexico. I'd like to thank the committee for adding an additional meeting date, as well as adopting a 24-hour public portal for committee feedback. For community feedback. We at Common Cause New Mexico, along with our national team, have reviewed the published rules, and we support their intent. It is our view that these rules provide maximum transparency to members of the public and help to build their confidence in the Citizens Redistricting Committee's work ahead. We have listened to the concerns expressed regarding Rule number 10 and feel it is an important section to ensure increased transparency of this committee's work on behalf of the public, and also believe it uplifts the credibility of the Citizens Redistricting Committee members. Essentially, a sunshine clause. And in addition to that, 10D does provide for public to reach out and have conversations with members of the committee, only that they be disclosed. We feel that it is critically important that the commission be able to connect with all of New Mexico's citizens without restriction, but feel it equally strong that conversations need to occur in the public sphere. We ask that the commission not open the door to subject themselves to those folks who may wish to lobby them behind closed doors with a political motivation that will erode the public trust in their work and the maps that are drawn. We encourage that these conversations occur either through the portal or at public hearings so that the public can clearly see that this commission operates out in the open, in stark contrast to the perception of prior redistricting committees over the past decades here in New Mexico. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you, Mario. Anybody else? Joanne?
We have one hand raised with John Daniel. John Daniel, you may unmute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Daniel. I'm Senior Advisor at the Center for Civic Policy. And I stand in opposition to, I urge you to not adopt the ex parte rule, Rule 10. I don't believe it's appropriate for a non-judicial body to be acting as a judicial entity. It's not the job of, you are effectively stand-ins for the legislature. This was the role that the legislature played typically in redistricting, holding public hearings, and there was no limitation on their access to the public. By the same token, I feel that this rule limits your access, your ability to reach out, whether it's checking in with the Census Bureau or go visiting a community on the ground and talking to folks there. I think there's too much risk that you will end up violating a rule or be challenged on that, which will not help the credibility of the committee. You should not be a sequestered jury. Furthermore, from what I'm seeing, this is not standard practice. This is not a best practice. I don't see that listed in Brennan Center or any of these others. In Colorado, there's a restriction on communications with staff attorneys and consultants shall not discuss redistricting plans with members of the public outside of an open meeting. In California, there's a similar restriction on staff. And the only other restriction I can find on the commission itself is that in California, 8 members are appointed, I guess, in a political fashion, and then those 8 members subsequently appoint an additional 6. The restriction in California is on the commissioners not to talk to any elected legislators or Congress people or their representatives, so that their judgments in selecting these subsequent members are not influenced in that way. So it's not standard practice, I don't believe. It's not a best practice. I think it's entirely inappropriate for this body. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, what is the committee's pleasure?
Justice, I know you, I think maybe you can't see, I raised my hand.
Oh, yes, I see it.
Try to be.
Go ahead, Ms. Curtis.
All right, so I really appreciate everyone taking the time to be at this meeting and voice how they feel about the rules. I want to make one quick comment about the contracting rule, and that is that I believe that Justice Chavez should have the ability to contract in all areas other than the legal field. I would like the opportunity to understand who is going to potentially or who can potentially serve as legal counsel for the committee. And simply that be something that's looked at and that we do that as a group. All right, on the ex parte rule, I want to have an open door policy with the public. As I voiced in my real job, I find that it's critical that I hear people on their timetable. While I appreciate that we're having open meetings and we've heard the problems that we are anticipating, and we have to follow the Voting Rights Act, and that applies to the Native American communities greatly in this state. And so there are important things that we will learn at public meetings, and I'm looking forward to that input. But as I stated, demanding the public to be on our timetable is not really appropriate. That in fact, they need people who have a position, who have been disadvantaged in the past, not heard, And I've given instances about this outside of the Native American communities, but the Black community in Hobbs, the Hispanic community in Clovis and Portales, the working people in those areas who can't make it to our meeting need to be able to talk to us, and they need to be able to be heard. We are not judges. Judges have an ex parte rule for a reason. We represent the citizens of this state, right? And I also looked at other states' acts, and Mr. Mitchell, who spoke earlier from California, I don't believe that his representation of the California Act was appropriate, because I looked to see if there were other commissions' rules, because our legislature chose not to put this in the act. All right, so that would be something we're adding on top of a law that was passed, which makes me uncomfortable. But the reality of that is that staff perhaps should not speak, all right, to other people, their staff or the committee. They don't have a decision-making role like we do. I'm concerned that staff and contractors have too much input in the committee's work, if that's the only group that we can speak to outside of the committee members. I don't believe that it brings credibility to the committee and its work to restrict access, which is what I believe this does. There has been an outcry already that the committee does not fairly represent the people that are impacted by the redistricting work that we're going to do. And that the people in the public that have spoken today, for Native Americans, for women, for working families, have unanimously asked that we not pass this particular rule. I appreciate, because being the sole woman on this committee of 7 people, in a representative capacity for 50% of our population, that women have a disproportionate difficulty. While I appreciate we're going to start meetings at 3 o'clock, school gets out at 2:30. All right. I mean, having women with children being able to attend meetings that we hold is incredibly difficult. And I want to hear those women's voices. So I think that I think for the communities of interest in this state to be adequately heard, they need to have open access to us. And so I'd urge the committee not to vote not to vote for, and in fact, take out that one provision, which is number 10 from the rules. Otherwise, I wanted to say how much I appreciate the work that, and I think we all do, that Chair Chavez has done on putting rules together for the committee. They're very thoughtful, and many of them very, very necessary. It's simply that I'd ask that the legal aspect of contracting be something that's attended to by the committee as a whole, and that Section 10 be removed from the rules. Thank you, Chair.
You're muted, Justice.
The motion that is made, I'm assuming that was a motion, Ms. Curtis, is to adopt all of the rules with the exception of allowing the chair to contract with attorneys who will represent the Citizen Redistricting Committee, and to delete in its entirety Section 10. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Yeah.
Joaquin?
Thank you, Justice. So, yeah, so I'd also like to support deleting Rule 10. And but I'd like to come at it from a slightly different angle, which is part of what I'm hoping to get out of this process is a deeper understanding from parts of our state that I don't understand now. And I think the only way to do that is to have lots of conversations. And I think this limits the conversation. And I think part of what we need to do is figure out how to have as many conversations as possible to really understand communities of interest and how to balance those interests. So for that reason, I'm supporting Lisa's motion.
Mr. Chairman, this
Anybody
is
else?
Michael Sanchez.
Yes. Go ahead,
I
Mr.
do
Sanchez.
support Ms. Curtis's motion. I think she's spot on in everything she said. I think it's the right thing to do, by the way. The other issue, though, that was presented by one of the individuals, I believe, dealt with Rule 11B and the maps. And I don't know that we've had a discussion on that yet, whether or not we would allow hand-drawn maps to be part of the record. And I think that's something that we need to at least address and talk about it. If we don't want to allow handmade maps to be presented to us, then I think we need to really look at that and wonder why we wouldn't want to. I understand the portal. I understand our new mechanisms through social medias and all of this, but I'm still one of the old school guys who likes papers, and I'm not really good at the internet at different times and getting things done that way. But I think it's something that we at least need to talk to, and I would ask the other members of the committee what their thought is on those types of maps and whether or not they think they should be allowed or not. That's just a question I have for other members of the committee as well as you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Other committee members? Robert?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's, another conflict we have is between transparency and access to us, to the public's access to us. That's what I got out of the public comments. And transparency is really important to me. I think that that's part of the reason that the redistricting process has been scrutinized for so long, because so many of the key decisions are happening behind closed doors. Now, this committee is going to overcome much of that transparency issue. And I think that the intent of the ex parte communication rule was to make this process as transparent as possible. So I support that. I also fully understand the desire of everybody here and everybody who's commented to have access to us as a committee member so that their voice can be heard. I want to have an open door policy with the public, as Lisa suggested. I want to do it on anybody's timetable, and I want to do it in anybody's preferred manner of communication. And my reading of the rules does not preclude me from doing that. My reading of the rules is that I must disclose the conversation if we discuss a district plan or any part of a district plan. I plan to track every communication I have throughout this process, whether or not this rule gets adopted. And so my reading of the rules just suggests that if we were to have, if the ex parte rule is implemented, and we do have a conversation with anybody that discusses a district plan or a part of the plan, then we disclose that. In no way, shape, or form do I interpret this rule as precluding me from having any conversation with people around the state. I am going to have an open door policy either way. When I'm done with my comment here, I'm going to put my email in the chat. Anybody who writes to me, if they're a human being, they'll get a response with my phone number. And I don't think the rule interferes with that. It just means that if somebody wants to discuss a district plan or a part of a district plan with me, then I've got to summarize that and send it to the chair, who will share it with everybody at the next meeting. That's my take on it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Robert. Christopher.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I support the motion and I support the clarification, if you will, by Mr. Sanchez. And just to be clear, I think we should accept maps as they come in, and that's simple.
Ryan?
Yes, sir. I agree with Ms. Curtis and what Mr. Salcedo just said. I agree with eliminating number 10, but I also agree with Chris with accepting maps as they come in.
Ms. Curtis, there's I think, an offer of an amendment to your motion that would also, in paragraph 11, allow the submission of hand-drawn maps.
I would support that amendment, or whatever the appropriate way to respond to that is. That is, yes, that sounds like a good idea to me.
You know, my memory has faded me. Somebody seconded your motion, right?
Chris did.
Chris did. Chris, I take it since you agreed previously that you
Yes.
second the amended motion?
Yes.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion
Aye.
signify, well, let's just do this by roll call. Ryan?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Joaquin?
Aye.
Christopher?
Aye.
Robert?
Mr. Chair, I support part of the amendment, but not the other. So I support the acceptance of paper maps. I do not support the removal of ex parte communication.
Okay, Michael?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Next item on the agenda.
Next item is the budget, sir.
Next item on the agenda is the budget. Raul Burciaga, are you still with us?
Mr. Chairman, good afternoon. Yes, I am.
Good afternoon. Would you mind just briefing us on the budget and how it came about?
I will. During the session, as this bill was moving along to create the Citizen Redistricting Committee, we were asked on how we can provide some funding. And in talking to some legislators, we took $300,000 of what we call, or what we refer to as, legislative cash balances, and had that money appropriated in House Bill 2 Junior. And so there is $300,000 specifically appropriated by the legislature and signed by the governor for this committee. In addition to that, there had been a previous appropriation for redistricting expenses that included the demographer, research and polling, and the attorneys that are going to work for the legislature. In that was included $100,000 for a redistricting committee, which we had presumed would have been for a legislator redistricting committee. That did not happen. Instead, this Citizen Redistricting Committee came about. So we're able to use that additional $100,000 for the committee. And so you have a net sum of $400,000. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would turn it over to you if you want to talk about the budget that you and others developed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burciaga. And just to be clear, the Legislative Council Service, because of the way the money is allocated, will serve as the fiscal agent for the Citizen Redistricting Committee?
Mr. Chairman and members, that's correct. The Legislative Council Service will provide some administrative support, primarily in the area of accounting. So the payments that are to be made for space, website development, some commission staff, per diem and mileage for the members, attorneys as needed, and the like, will be paid for through the Legislative Council Service. In other words, we will process the vouchers, get them through DFA, and reimbursements made to the appropriate parties.
Thank you. Okay, now with respect to the budget, it's something that I have put together. Let me get to it. Do you all have it in front of you?
Yes.
Okay, we began with the balance that Raul described, $400,000. I propose that we allocate $25,000 for translation services. The Spanish translation is already taken care of. I know that there are some Native American translators who have indicated their hourly rate at anywhere from $30 per hour to $75 per hour. And I would like to make sure that we get as many languages translated for submitting comments, for drawing maps, for educating the public on how to participate in the redistricting process. And so that's what I've allocated. Office space at the State Bar Center. It's at a rate of $400 a month. We would have access to a private office, plus also an area for staff, accessibility, conference room tables, website development. The Legislative Council Service has already issued a contract with a website developer, and they're undergoing their efforts now, and they are working in conjunction with Dr. Muchin to import the online portal. Research and polling is actually going to be paid by the Legislative Council Service, but they will be made available to us through October 23rd. Research and polling will not be allowed to assist us with the evaluation of the maps once they are adopted, but they can attend up to 7 initial meetings and a subsequent 7 meetings. I propose that we contract with the State Ethics Commission staff. They've been very helpful thus far, just trying to develop a blueprint for how we operate, reaching out to different venues to see what the expenses are. And they would be available. They would be available to facilitate the Zoom meeting, to do basically what Joanne has done, which is allow public commentary. If somebody shows up with a map at a meeting that has not been downloaded, they would actually they would take a picture of it so that it can be uploaded and shared with the entire public that's looking at it. So we've tentatively agreed on a amount of $36,611. The State Ethics Commission also wants, inappropriately so, mileage for attending meetings. I've allocated the areas of the meetings. We're going to have to add another meeting to this list, but I don't think it's going. I think I have enough reserves to take care of that. I've allocated $350 per hour for approximately 250 hours for an attorney. That's just an estimate, what it might cost. No attorney from New Mexico responded to a request for proposals. So that deadline was yesterday. New Mexico attorneys apparently are not interested in applying, but as I indicated earlier, Ruth Greenwood and the Harvard Law School Election Law Clinic have offered to represent the committee pro bono, and a local attorney can sign on with them. They will largely be assisting us with federal law, but there's also potential state constitutional provisions that they would address. So my reading of the ethics rules would require them to associate with local counsel, and that's very doable. And the price is right, and these are folks that have litigated redistricting cases throughout the United States, so they're very experienced. Next is if some of the committee members, you're entitled to per diem and mileage, and so we have a calculated figure for that. Technical expert estimate at this point is not in this budget, but the technical expert that we need is someone to assist us to evaluate the maps. And I believe that we can accomplish that for a cap of $40,000. Venues, I've got listed what we have learned thus far from the various venues and what they would charge. We will again have to add another venue to this list and see what that expense would be. The Zoom webcast, Legislative Council Service has been kind enough to allow us to use their Zoom, and they will also webcast from the state capitol when we go there. I've arranged for security with the Department of Public Safety. At this point, they're telling me that they will not charge to do that. I have budgeted for advertising and public outreach $100,000, and we'll seek some proposals for the committee to consider. But I think public outreach is going to be key to all of this, and making sure that we get people engaged and help them engage in the process. We're also entitled to lodging, and I assume we'll probably spend overnight. So when you look at the total there, we still have a reserve of about $45,500. Obviously, some of that will be taken to take care of the per diem and mileage. And if you all agree with me that Ruth Greenwood and the Harvard Law School Election Law Clinic is the appropriate attorneys for our work, then we can eliminate the over $80,000 that I had allocated for that. So that's the budget. I'm happy to answer any questions or listen to your comments.
One question, Justice Joaquin.
Yes.
So,
Yes, Joaquin.
Based on our last vote, where we're adding, the acceptance of hand-drawn maps, and then also if we receive testimony during public hearings that have not been uploaded on the portal, is there a way to get those, transcribed into the portal by staff or by someone? Can that be part of the resources that we use so that there is a common place where we're storing all of this information?
The answer to that is yes. I can, let me call on Jeremy Ferris to make sure that my representation is accurate, but what we propose to do is anything that we receive at the office, by mail, by email, would then be uploaded to the website so that the public can see what's going on. Jeremy, can you unmute?
Hi, good afternoon, committee members, Justice Chavez. So Joaquin, there are limits to what the State Ethics Commission staff is going to do in our MOU with you proposed. It's not contemplated that State Ethics Commission staff would transcribe hearing testimony that comes in at public meetings. I think you need to contract for a service that can transcribe the live testimony that comes in live public meetings. But once that's done, that should be able to be uploaded onto the district portal.
Let me just add to that. We're recording every meeting, and the recording will be made available. We also have to index the information that we get during the public meetings, and I'll have somebody to do that. But I was not planning on having a transcript typewritten for every meeting we have. That's pretty expensive, and we have budgetary limits. The only reason you would need a transcript would be a litigation, and hopefully this committee is not going to be embroiled in litigation. Any other? Did that answer your question, Joaquin?
So I guess it's more about the hand-drawn map. If there's a way of getting that scanned and made available so that not just the committee can see it, but that becomes part of the the whole spectrum that people are seeing when they visit the portal. So I guess it's more that than the transcribing.
Jeremy?
So as to that, Joaquin, I'm not familiar enough with Districtor to know whether or not Moon Duchin's application will just readily available, make that available for uploading a PDF, but that certainly could happen on the CRC's website that's being developed. So if it's not available on Districtor, it could be made available on the CRC's website.
Any other questions?
Mr. Borsiega has his hand up.
No, Raul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very quickly, as was mentioned, these, at least this meeting, but I expect others, if they're going to be webcast by us, the webcast has the ability for you to click on closed caption. So that's handy for somebody who needs it, because if they're hard of hearing. But if somebody is reviewing it, there's closed caption that they can read what is being said or has been said. So that may be an assistance to look at that. As far as the hand-drawn maps, I agree with Mr. Ferris. I'm not sure how those would be handled, but we can look at that when we get to that point.
Thank you. Anything else from the committee? We have a number of things that we need to take action on. Well, there's really only the attorney, because as I understand the committee, you've authorized me to contract other than with the attorneys. So do you want to take up the attorney issue now?
I apologize, Chair. I'm not quite following you. You mean an attorney issue allocation of that money from the budget, or whether we keep it there? I was going to ask that maybe we extend the proposal date, not by much, but by some period, if that's possible, because this is our first public meeting and we've had such good participation, to see whether there are other people that might be interested in that proposal. That would be my only, I don't know whether that's a great idea or it isn't. I don't understand the state government realities behind that may make that, I don't know, impossible or difficult or timing not work. I just wanted to put that out there. It always concerns me some when New Mexico is a unique state to practice law in, and I would much, much, much rather have a New Mexico attorney involved if possible.
That was my hope, and that's why we published for 2 full weeks. And I know some committee members reached out to New Mexico lawyers, and there's not much appetite. Mr. Burciaga?
Mr. Chairman?
Is it possible to extend the proposal for another 7 days?
It is, Mr. Chairman, we can do that. Do you want it 7 days from today or 7 days from Tuesday when we're back? Monday's a holiday.
I think 7 days, there's not going to be any activity. But I'm in favor of extending it if the rest of the committee is.
Mr. Chairman, this is Michael Sanchez. I don't have a problem with it being extended. I agree with Ms. Curtis as well, but I don't have a problem with it being extended. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, there being no objections, we'll extend it.
Sorry, question.
Yes.
I guess I do not know the legal community. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just curious how to interpret the fact that there was not any responses. Is it because of, or what is it? I mean, what's going on?
I don't know. I can't answer that question. Redistricting is a complicated area of the law. I think lawyers just think about it as something very simple. It's a very complicated area of the law. Lawyers look at this in New Mexico once every 10 years. Every single lawyer who's going to apply, of course, they don't want to, would have to refresh their memory on what the law is. They would have to update themselves on what the law is. Yeah, I don't know what the dynamics are, but I do know that if we don't get a New Mexico lawyer, we have a team of professionals ready to help us in the state of New Mexico. So with that, there being no other comments, then why don't we go 7 days from, I'd rather go from today, Raul, because we need a lawyer, and these meetings are going to start in 1 month.
Mr. Chairman, I will do that. I'm just not sure that I can get the word out or the notice posted today.
We'll post it as soon as you can post it for 7 days.
Okay, I will do that.
Meantime, I'd ask permission of the committee to at least discuss with the Harvard Election Law Clinic a scope of work and get them ready to go if nobody's willing to represent us that is equally or more qualified.
I of course would support that.
I support that as well.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's fine. But Justice, to clarify, you said that they would still be looking for local counsel. Is that correct?
It's basically just local counsel in the event that they need to counsel us on New Mexico law. The only thing I can think of would be potentially the Open Meetings Act issues, IPRA issues. We might need a local counsel for that limited purpose. But these are experts in federal law.
So you're
and
talking
there's also there's other potentials, but local counsel would be very limited. The expense there would be very limited.
Thank you.
Justice Chavez, if I may, the New Mexico State Constitution has a free and opens election clause, which in other states has been a basis for challenges against so-called partisan gerrymanders. And for the out-of-state lawyers to provide counsel on whether or not proposed maps are compliant with a certain reading of the free and opens election clause, they would have to associate under rules of professional conduct with New Mexico lawyers for that purpose too. So the local counsel might have to kind of look at issues that go beyond OMA and IPRA.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Okay, so Raul, if you will do that for us and just notify us when it gets published. And when I return, I'll work on a scope of work with Harvard. And if it does not come to pass, it doesn't come to pass, but at least we're ready to hit the ground running soon.
Mr. Chairman and members, I will extend the RFP for 7 days from Tuesday the 6th. And I will also see if, with the committee's permission, if we can get a press release out and maybe get a little bit more publicity that that the committee is looking for an attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda.
The contract demographer, did you want me to talk about that? You touched on it already, but I can kind of touch base on that real quickly.
Yeah, to touch base on it because there's an agreement that you had to enter into with research and polling. So.
Correct.
Please
So,
thank
you, Mr. Chairman and members. Very quickly, last year, sometime in the fall, we issued an RFP for a technical consultant, a demographer, in other words, for redistricting. We only had one response to the RFP, and that was by research and polling. And they were selected. They obviously scored well as well also. And they have been under contract for redistricting purposes since late 2020 or early 2021. Part of their scope of work is to assist the redistricting committee. And again, because no legislative committee was created, it's presumed that the research and polling will assist this committee. With that said, however, and because of some of the prohibitions on partisan issues, the MOU that was developed was for research and polling to work solely with the CRC from now, July 2nd through October 23rd. So during that time, research and polling will not be available to the legislature, to any individual legislator, to any leadership, to any caucus. They will be solely doing work for the committee. And then once that happens, October 23rd, after that, then the committee will no longer have use of research and polling, and research and polling will be able to work with legislators on their request. With that, I'll I'm happy to stand for questions. I don't know if Mr. Sanderoff or Mr. Sharp want to clarify anything that I've just mentioned.
Mr. Sanderoff or Mr. Sharp?
Can you hear me, Justice?
Yes, sir.
No, I think Raul said it well. We're here to serve the Citizen Redistricting Committee, to staff the meetings, to draw plans at your requests. And then our work will end October 23rd. Hopefully you will have adopted plans by then. Then you'll go through a separate process of measures of partisan fairness as required in the law. And that will be done outside of our work by an additional expert that you'll be hiring that you mentioned. And so that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Mr. Sanderoff. Any questions from the committee for either Mr. Burciaga or Mr. Sanderoff? Okay, see none. Let's go to the next item. Jeremy, would you talk for a moment about the W-9 issue for those who seek per diem and mileage?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So if any of the committee members would like to receive per diem and mileage, first you need to become a supplier to the state if you already aren't. That means completing a W-9. If you'd like to send that our way to the State Ethics Commission, we'll kind of gather some of that material together. Ultimately, Legislative Counsel Service will be the point of contact with DFA, but you know, we're trying to be supportive here as well and not let the whole weight fall on Raul and his team. We're trying to share the burden of standing this agency up across our two agencies. So first, if you want to receive per diem and mileage, you need to become a supplier to the state, fill out a W-9. That has to go to DFA's vendor relations. It takes a little bit of time to get it in the system, but once it's in the system, then you'll need to fill out a per diem and mileage reimbursement form, which we'll make available to you by email. And again, that we'll collect all that, check it, and send it to Raul and Anessa LSC CFO. So look for an email from us on W-9s, expenditure reports, per diem forms.
Any questions from the committee? Okay, item 5 on the agenda, pending contracts and authorization of the chair. I believe by having adopted the rule that allows me to contract with the exception of with attorneys, that this item is taken care of. Do you all agree?
Yes.
Okay. All right. The next item on the agenda is just a reminder of the Princeton webinars that are intended to teach us. A concerned citizen had expressed concern that it violates the Open Meetings Act. I did consult with the Attorney General's office, and I forwarded to you an email reply from the Attorney General's office that indicates that the way it's being approached is fine. It's not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. They do give notice to the public. I've received assurance from Adam that they would do so contemporaneously with the notice that we receive. And in addition, they will post the actual webinar for the public. And so we will continue with those. The next one is scheduled for July 7th. It's an important one. I'm going to miss it, but it's an important one. So I urge you all to attend. Any questions about the Princeton webinars? Okay. Finally, Joanne, is there anybody that wants to make any final public comments?
Justice Chavez, we do have 2 individuals with their hands raised in the attendee room. The first is John Daniel. John Daniel, you may unmute.
I'm sorry, my hand should have been up. You can continue.
Thank you for your participation tonight. Next.
Okay, the second hand is Richard Mason. Richard Mason, you may unmute.
Yeah, Justice Chavez, members of the committee, I'm Dick Mason with the League of Women Voters of New Mexico. I want to thank you all for your commitment to public service by serving on this committee. And, you know, I do want to, on the ex parte, I would like the committee to think about possibly barring ex parte communication with existing office holders who have an interest in the redistricting process. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Any other comments, Joanne, from the public?
Yes, we have two more individuals with their hands raised. The first is Atza Chavez. Atza, you may unmute.
Hello, I am the ED for NAVA Education Project, a nonpartisan nonprofit that began in the 1990s that has been working with the 22 tribal nations in New Mexico on civic engagement, environmental justice, 2020 census, and now leading the Native Redistricting Committee. I was also a member of the Redistricting Task Force that convened prior to the 2020 legislative session. Even though this body did not determine their own appointments, we want to take this moment to acknowledge the lack of diversity. Indigenous, Black, and Asian New Mexicans have no representation in this committee. There is only one woman. All the members of this committee are from Albuquerque or communities adjacent to the metro area. There were 3 exceedingly qualified Native American women, members of New Mexico's pueblos and nations, who applied to the CRC but were not appointed. This was a huge disappointment for us and all of the Native American communities and Native organizations who understand the long-term implications that redistricting will have on our representation. But we want to see the CRC succeed in its mission. There are substantial benefits to an independent redistricting committee, and New Mexico can use this experience to serve as a successful model. We wish to have a meaningful working relationship with the committee in order to advocate for New Mexico's Native American communities and to facilitate positive and productive intergovernmental relationships. Despite our concerns on the issue of diversity, this is a respectable group, and we want to commend you and are confident in the willingness of the committee to suggest fair and nonpartisan maps for New Mexico with input from all communities. So we just wanted to say, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, and we look forward to working with you and hope that you will reach out to us if you see that if there's not enough satisfaction, just let us know. That goes true for any public member. Joanne?
We have Charlotte Little. Charlotte, you may unmute.
Thank you. I will keep my comments short. Thank you, Justice Chavez and members of the committee. Again, I work with the NAVA Education Project to help coordinate the Native Redistricting Coalition. The NAVA Education Project is a nonpartisan organization with the ability to give public input or coordinate with our communities on this issue. As such, we are working with the leaders and representatives of New Mexico's 23 pueblos, tribes, and nations, and organizations representing indigenous citizens who live in urban communities. This coalition and our partners are working to ensure all tribal citizens have the information, tools, and access to provide input into the redistricting process. We look forward to working with you and the members of the coalition to achieve fair and equitable maps. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Joanne, anybody else?
Justice Chavez, I do not see any other individuals with their hands raised in the attendee room.
Thank you, Joanne. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Very quickly, if I could, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
On one, I want to recognize the comment from Atza Chavez on the lack of cultural and geographic diversity on this committee. It is a very fair criticism. And I think that I, for one, and I hope the rest of the members of the committee are going to do everything we can over the next few months to demonstrate that we are here to serve and to listen to every resident of New Mexico and come up with the most fair and balanced redistricting plans that we can. So I thought it was important to recognize that criticism and acknowledge that we're going to do everything we can to overcome that. I also, Mr. Chair, wanted to circle back quickly on item 6, the Princeton webinars. There's no mention, there's one topic in there that I'm quite interested in that isn't covered on there, and that's with regards to prison gerrymandering. And it's a topic I'm somewhat familiar with, and I had some folks recently from the ACLU reach out and they wanted to provide me a briefing, but I thought it would be better if we did that for the benefit of the whole committee. So I don't know if that's something we can, discuss, adding to one of those webinars or adding as a separate webinar, if there's any interest among the committee.
I will explore that and see if Princeton can help us out with that. But I would encourage the ACLU to attend a meeting and make a presentation to the committee. Anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I'd second. I would
Great.
second. Right?
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Thank you very much. I know we went well past 5 o'clock, but I really appreciate everybody's participation in this meeting and your thoughtfulness. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
See you next time.
Nice to see you all. Take care.
Everybody have a great 4th of July weekend. Be safe.
Yes, you too.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.